Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
At the moment of falling into the abyss, Chen Ming's eyes were instantly filled with darkness. He felt his consciousness become extremely blurred, as if everything in the world was far away from him. This was a situation that had never happened since his psychic strength level reached level 5, and his mental strength was enough to support his long-term existence in the Scarlet. He was even completely unable to resist this situation, because he took the initiative to enter the abyss. He must bear such consequences, and he must do so. Only in this way can he find a chance to fight back. Just thinking that this was the ability of the Scarlet Heart that grew up with his ability as a template. He found it a little difficult to understand. After all, he didn't have such power. There was no time to think about anything else. Chen Ming found that his state of consciousness was getting worse, and he was gradually unable to feel his consciousness. It was as if everything that belonged to him was sinking into this abyss. If this state and situation continued, he would lose consciousness in a short time. If he completely lost consciousness, there was no need to think about what the result would be. Knowing that he didn't have much time, Chen Ming immediately struggled to wake up. But the action of waking up was extremely difficult. When he mobilized his mental power, it was like mobilizing it from glue, and a sticky feeling that was about to solidify was always around him. This made Chen Ming feel not only difficult, but also painful. He tried his best to use his mental power, but he could only crawl a little distance out of the glue. His mental power was being consumed faster than when he formed a mental shield before. This seemed to work. Chen Ming continued to consume his mental power in this darkness, and the dawn of crawling out of the abyss was already in sight. But as Chen Ming opened his eyes, he found himself suddenly sitting in the cockpit of a dilapidated spaceship. Chen Ming would never forget this familiar structure in his life. This was his first spaceship. Iron ore. Chen Ming turned his eyes to look out the porthole of the iron ore, and the scene outside was different from what he thought it should be at this moment. At this time, it was not pitch black outside the iron ore, but the green and purple vegetation environment of Rainbow. Chen Ming felt that he had woken up, but everything in front of him told him the opposite. Either he was dreaming, or his memory was turned out by the Scarlet Heart. Chen Ming had a clear understanding of his state. Of course, he knew that what he experienced was definitely not a dream when he fell asleep on Rainbow. That situation was basically certain, especially at this time. Some special clouds appeared in the sky outside the spacecraft. Chen Ming used to not know what the appearance of such clouds on Rainbow meant. But now he knew that these clouds indicated that a rainstorm was coming. Chen Ming was deeply impressed by this memory because he had only experienced a rainstorm once on Rainbow. He tried to get up and look around, but a feeling of extreme stiffness prevented him from doing so. He could not control the body sitting on the iron ore at all, and could only watch himself sitting in the chair unable to move. Only his eyes could move slightly. No matter how hard he tried to use his mental power, he couldn't affect anything. At this time, he couldn't even use his psychic power to control the iron ore or any metal objects at any level. He didn't seem to belong here. But he could clearly feel that he was here. All he could do was watch. After a while, the body in Chen Ming's view suddenly moved. He took a look at yesterday's log. He fed the little stone on the ship. He took care of the crops outside. He took the pistol and the little stone and left the spacecraft to go hunting. This was no different from what happened in Chen Ming's memory, as if he had really returned to the past and personally experienced the past memories. This identical scene made Chen Ming somewhat immersed in it. But he also kept telling himself that all this was false. The body went out to look for possible traces of prey according to the previous memory. He squatted on a tree near where the traces were found. Everything was very calm, and the body squatted until it started to rain lightly in the sky. Chen Ming, who was almost drowsy because of the boring hunting process, suddenly woke up. Here it comes. The Scarlet Heart must have had some purpose in bringing him to this place. And what happened before was no different from what he remembered. The only change should be after this. The rain gradually got heavier. A group of cattle beasts foraging in the river appeared in Chen Ming's perspective. He raised his gun and aimed at the cattle beasts. But at this moment, an unprecedented tingling sensation broke out in Chen Ming's mind. His mind instantly fell into a painful confusion. But then Chen Ming recovered from the confusion. Although this made him feel the pain more clearly, it also allowed him to stay awake. Chen Ming remembered that at this time before, the mechanical mind pulse generator left on Reimu did work. But at that time, the mental pulse only affected some animals, and the impact on humans was not that great. This is change. This is what the Scarlet Heart is doing. Chen Ming endured the pain and felt more clearly the difference between the memory and what was happening at the moment. His body covered his head in pain at this time. In the memory, Xiao Shi screamed and rolled from Chen Ming's body to the ground, and soon there was no sound. Chen Ming knew that it was a memory now, so he just watched everything that happened indifferently, suppressing the pain in his mind. At this moment, the sound of the surging river came to his ears amid the sound of heavy rain. It was the bull beast in the river that fell into a violent attack and rushed towards him. Chen Ming's body turned around and ran, but was immediately knocked to the ground by the crazy bull beast. While rolling on the ground, he clearly saw the scene of the small stone on the ground being crushed by the bull beast. Chen Ming's heart tightened. Even if it was just a fake, he definitely didn't want to see this scene happen. Then, the thick hoof stained with blood and flesh trampled on Chen Ming's body. The pain of being crushed by the bull beast was unreserved and even more intensely transmitted to Chen Ming's consciousness. This pain was more severe than any physical pain Chen Ming had ever experienced. But Chen Ming had experienced more than just Rui Muxing. The real pain he had experienced was 100 times, 1,000 times stronger than the pain at this moment. Chen Ming almost instantly became firm. But at the moment when the head of his body was crushed by the bull beast, his eyes blurred. The bull beast, the rainstorm, and Rui Muxing all disappeared. In front of him was a more familiar place. Yu Wei Underground Laboratory. Blood and flesh covered every inch of the corridor leading to the laboratory. Chen Ming stood at the end of the corridor, in front of the door of the laboratory. This was where he first encountered the distorted heart. When he came here, Chen Ming suddenly forgot what he was doing just now for some reason. And he was immediately attracted by the things in front of him. Several thick flesh tentacles stretched out from the gap of the laboratory door and whipped him. There was no time to think about what was going on. His body was whipped by the tentacles to the flesh wall next to him, and he spit out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, Chen Ming also found that he could finally move. Although he was a little confused at this time why he had the feeling of finally. But the most urgent thing at the moment was to find a way to avoid these tentacles that seemed to be in his memory. He rolled to avoid the subsequent tentacles that whipped him and habitually called on spiritual energy while a piece of blood was raised on the wall hit by the tentacles. He wanted to directly crush these tentacles that seemed to be extremely weak in his eyes with metal liquid. But he failed to do so. There was only a flamethrower in his hand. Chen Ming was stunned, but he still used the flamethrower to deal with several tentacles and the flesh and blood tissues blocking the outside of the laboratory. He was just about to stay where he was and think about what state he was in now. But the door of the laboratory suddenly opened completely, and a terrifying suction came from the door, sucking him in. After passing through most of the laboratory structures, Chen Ming came to the deepest part of the laboratory and saw the distorted heart in the dark. The heart began to beat. Chen Ming's chest felt incomparable pain again. This pain made his body have an uncontrollable instinctive reaction. He curled up on the ground, unable to move. Several blood vessel-like tentacles grew from the flesh and blood, entangled around Chen Ming's body, and restricted him in place. The body that had just recovered from the beating of the distorted heart had no time to move, and the heart beat again. Chen Ming felt that something in his chest had cracked, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of turbid blood. The distorted heart beat again. This time his body spit out a large pool of blood mixed with organ fragments. The body fell completely, but Chen Ming's consciousness was still clear. He could clearly feel that his heart was shattered. His body was torn into pieces by the tentacles of the Scarlet Heart, and even his spiritual nerves were pulled out. This pain was more painful than being crushed by the bull beast before. But Chen Ming didn't care about the physical pain at this moment. Again, he had experienced more painful situations than this. He just felt something was wrong. He felt that he seemed to have forgotten something. Some things that were painful, but after the pain, there was also the joy of surviving a disaster. These things were obviously very recent. But He couldn't remember them. Before he had time to think deeply, Chen Ming's eyes blurred again, and he suddenly appeared in Yu Hui's territory. The laboratory that Yu Hui set up specifically for him to conduct research and also to restrict him. Chen Ming once again felt a sense of emptiness of losing something. At the same time, he once again felt the familiar feeling that he was in his memory. This is his memory. This is also his memory. And at this time, the 14th Legion was ready to rescue him. His front foot was extracted by Yu Hui to enlighten his spiritual nerves, and his back foot was suddenly stabbed in the back by one of his own people after he had clearly discussed it with Bai Quan. Now he has to go through it again, and the result will definitely not be any better. But to be honest, if Chen Ming hadn't clearly realized that this was his memory, then he might have been in pain because of such a situation. But he knew that this was a spiritual space created by the Scarlet Heart. Even though his mind was suffering from both physical and spiritual suffering at the same time, he was still experiencing the torture of death over and over again. But in the end, it couldn't defeat him completely. He persisted. So what if his mental power was tortured? Although he was in the abyss, he still couldn't clearly realize what he had lost because of the Scarlet Heart. But he could clearly feel that his consciousness and mental state were weakening. He doesn't need to think about what he has lost. All he has to do is be firm in his thoughts. If only he could find a way to kill Scarlet Heart, all that would be history. Although Chen Ming had no obvious feelings, he was constantly experiencing everything in the past. Experiencing his memories and losing them again. Starting from the memories before entering Scarlet this time, the memories belonging to Chen Ming are being gradually erased. This is suppression at the spiritual level, and this is the ability given to the Scarlet Heart by the Scarlet Power. The Scarlet Heart is undoubtedly the most powerful creature in the entire Scarlet Dimension. The closer Chen Ming's memories are to the real time, the faster they disappear under the influence of its power. Because these memories have not yet had time to leave the deepest impression on Chen Ming. Until memories related to Scarlet Heart. Scarlet Heart did not touch these memories immediately. Because at this moment, Chen Ming has regarded this memory as a lost weather vane when remembering in the urban area. Once Scarlet Heart tries to erase this memory, Chen Ming will definitely be stimulated to take back everything lost from it. So Scarlet Heart did not continue to do this, but began to slowly clear the past memories. Those memories, although forgotten in superficial memory, actually constitute a person's basic cognitive view of the world. Chen Ming has an extremely clear understanding of himself, and the disappearance of these memories will cause some changes in his personality. It was these changes that made Chen Ming finally realize what happened for a moment. Chen Ming finally realized what happened. His mental power immediately protected himself, but it could not prevent this from happening. The power of the Scarlet Heart is almost the same as his. When facing the Scarlet Heart, whose psychic power is more powerful, the power of the same origin is almost the last straw that breaks his heart. Chen Ming felt more unwillingness and pain in his heart. He wanted to ask a question. Why? Why did he have the strength he has today after struggling all the way? But Scarlet Heart can rely on him to create something from scratch and even become more powerful than him? Chen Ming's memory is becoming more and more blurred, but his obsession became clearer. At this moment, Chen Ming felt that his body seemed to have changed. He became Scarlet Heart, but not the one he faced. Instead, it is a Scarlet Heart that is only the size of a normal human heart. Weak and helpless. Just like what the brainwashed psyker said, when someone masters the power of Scarlet. Among the Scarlet, a Scarlet life will be born that resonates with the human being who has the power of Scarlet. And because of this situation, there are more than one Scarlet beings born. At this time, Chen Ming became the Scarlet Heart and became a small one among the countless Scarlet Hearts floating in the Scarlet. The relationship between countless Scarlet Hearts is not friendly. When a certain point in time arrives, all Scarlet Hearts begin to fight each other. Countless Scarlet Hearts sprouted countless twisted organs, constantly biting and devouring other hearts. Of course, this one also includes Chen Ming. Chen Ming's Scarlet Heart was swallowed up after only 3 minutes in Chen Ming's body. But it's not completely dead yet. Even if it is swallowed up, with only a ray of consciousness left, it can rely on this ray of consciousness to regain the body of the Scarlet Heart and continue its actions of devouring everything with its new, more powerful body. When Chen Ming used Scarlet's power, Scarlet was also using Chen Ming's power. The Scarlet Heart that distributes the power of Chen Ming equally to every existence. Let the Scarlet Hearts devour each other and evolve until the most powerful one. Once the Scarlet Hearts devour each other until the number is insufficient, the Scarlet Dimension will continue to use Chen Ming's power to create more and more powerful Scarlet Hearts and continue to fight. Scarlet Hearts do not have a very obvious human-like consciousness, and they do not feel pain due to such killings. It was just Chen Ming's unwillingness that seemed to allow Scarlet Heart to find the possibility of breaking through Chen Ming's defenses. That's why this memory belonging to it was stuffed into Chen Ming's mind. Chen Ming's consciousness is following Scarlet Heart to experience everything in Scarlet Heart, and he is suffering everything that Scarlet Heart has ever suffered. These extremely cruel scenes are nothing to the creatures in Scarlet. But for the creatures of Scarlet Heart, such pain is absolutely unbearable. This is truly more painful than what Chen Ming has experienced. And in this process, Chen Ming's memory is no longer simply disappearing. The memory of Scarlet Heart is replacing Chen Ming's memory. The Scarlet Heart is assimilating him. And he seems to be unable to do anything and can only watch all this happen. His memories are being replaced again, and his personality is being erased. Chen Ming can feel that he is close to the edge of death. The sense of danger in his mind is still insisting on stinging his consciousness until now. Chen Ming is clear about his situation, and he is thinking whether he has really fallen into a situation where he is completely powerless to resist. Just before he really made this judgment. In his consciousness, all memories after March 12, 5601 AD were completely erased. Only the memory related to Scarlet Heart and the instinct for survival that Chen Ming forced himself to engrave on himself were left. Chen Ming's instinct was not triggered here, because when those memories disappeared, Chen Ming's cognition was completely split. This split gave his mental power almost infinite stimulation, because he lost all his memories after he came to this world. March 12, 5601 AD was the day he really came to this world. He was a time traveler. Chen Ming's consciousness was stimulated to the extreme by these 5 words at this moment, and his consciousness was instantly clear. All memories were restored at this moment. He wanted to open his eyes, but found that his consciousness was rooted in this abyss. He immediately separated a small piece of self-consciousness and directly abandoned it as bait, just like what the brainwashed psychic did before. He used this small piece of consciousness as bait to guide the Scarlet Heart to devour and assimilate. In this way, the most important part of his consciousness was out of this abyss. Chen Ming opened his eyes instantly. He found that he was floating in the abyss of the heart crack at this time. The abyss on the heart was not completely dark. Countless blood-colored crystals were scattered on the edge, illuminating the abyss. At this moment, the flesh and blood tissue extending from the heart was wrapping him inside. It made him look like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, or like prey trapped in a spider web. A part of the flesh and blood tissue of the Scarlet Heart had already assimilated with his consciousness. But everything was still in time. Chen Ming's mental power became active again. His consciousness tore the flesh and blood tissue that wrapped him. Some of the flesh and blood connected to the consciousness body just entered Chen Ming's consciousness body. But Chen Ming did not stop it, and his body was more intensely bursting with the power of Scarlet. The Scarlet Dimension is said to be the home of Scarlet creatures. But doesn't he also control the Scarlet power? This should also be his home, and it must be his home. Chen Ming suddenly felt something in his heart, as if he was saying to the Scarlet Heart, and also to himself, "You are just a copy of my power. I am the real Chen Ming. I am the real Scarlet." Chen Ming put aside his worries that using the Scarlet power would make the Scarlet Heart stronger. His Scarlet power was constantly pouring out of his consciousness, forming circles of blood-red blood rings around him, completely blocking the Scarlet power of the Scarlet Heart. As he did this, the surface of the Scarlet Heart was also showing more obvious patterns on the skin of the phased beast. A special spatial force was emerging on the Scarlet Heart. As a Scarlet creature, it really mastered part of the power of the phase. This was very terrifying, Because once it really mastered this power, it could tear the spatial dimension like Chen Ming did before, enter the phase space, and completely erode the phase. Humans would lose the refuge of the phase space, and the Scarlet would rely on the phase to enter the normal universe. Even if the weakest Scarlet creature invaded the normal universe, the impact and consequences would be immeasurable. Because this not only means a creature, but also means that the channel has been opened, and an endless stream of Scarlets will invade the normal universe one after another. Humans can only gamble on the tiny possibility that a powerful psychic will not be killed by the Scarlet matter after entering the Scarlet dimension, and at the same time, the possibility of mastering the Scarlet power after surviving. We also have to gamble on the possibility that the psychic who enters the Scarlet dimension successfully masters the Scarlet power and has not been filled with Scarlet matter and gone crazy. Finally, we have to gamble on the possibility that the Scarlet power mastered by this psychic is enough to deal with the Scarlet invasion crisis. Can this be gambled? No one knows. But when necessary, no matter how small the probability of this matter is, it is always a path that humans can choose when facing the Scarlet. But when the Scarlet Heart, the most powerful creature in the Scarlet dimension, enters the normal universe, this probability will be completely wiped out. No one has the power to kill the Scarlet Heart and stop it from leading the Scarlet creatures to invade, except Chen Ming himself. So he will never let the Scarlet Heart truly realize the ability to master the phase space. The Scarlet Heart must die here. Chen Ming floated in the crack of the Scarlet Heart and completely got rid of the control of the Scarlet Heart. The Scarlet power was gathering in his hands, and at the moment it gathered to its peak. A mechanical arm with flesh and blood and mechanical properties, formed by the fusion of metal liquid and Scarlet power, appeared on Chen Ming's arm. And beside him, a larger half-flesh and half-mechanical arm also emerged from the void. With Scarlet bloodlight, it swung towards the inner wall of the Scarlet Heart and punched the blood-colored crystals that illuminated the abyss. Two similar but fundamentally different Scarlet powers collided in the cracks of the Scarlet Heart. A sticky and heavy Scarlet breath exploded at the location where the Scarlet power collided, and the cracks that were originally illuminated by the blood-red crystals were completely hidden in the blood mist. This blood mist affected Chen Ming and the Scarlet Heart at the same time. It made the surface of Chen Ming's consciousness grow various thick and thin myocardial tissues in a disorderly manner. And on the inner wall of the Scarlet Heart, countless strange mechanical structures grew out of thin air between the blood-colored crystals. Inserted into the muscle tissue of the Scarlet Heart, it moved in a completely incomprehensible but functional way. It constantly tore apart the nearby flesh and blood tissues and replaced them with the flesh and blood squeezed out of these machines. Chen Ming's Scarlet is different from the Scarlet of the Scarlet Dimension and the Scarlet Heart. His Scarlet is mechanical Scarlet, which is the external manifestation of his Scarlet power and is exerted on the Scarlet Heart. That's it. Chen Ming tore off a few muscle tissues growing on his body with his hands, and his eyes were always fixed on those mechanical structures. So far, among all the abilities he has mastered, there is only one ability that the Scarlet Heart has not replicated. That is his mechanical ability. Pure machinery can hurt Scarlet, but it cannot defeat Scarlet. But when this machine is not pure machinery, but Scarlet machinery, it has the power to destroy the Scarlet Heart. Just when more and more mechanical structures appeared in the blood mist in the body of the Scarlet Heart, constantly assimilating those myocardial tissues. A destructive psychic wave suddenly appeared on the surface of the Scarlet Heart, trying to remove the scarlet mechanical flesh and blood belonging to Chen Ming. How could Chen Ming give him such an opportunity? The genuine destruction core appeared in his other hand. His mental power continued to enter the destruction core, continuously releasing the power of destruction, offsetting the destructive power belonging to the Scarlet Heart. Chen Ming had already closed the rift leading to the phase space of the Scarlet Dimension at this time. Under normal circumstances, his mental power consumption should be very serious. But at this time, he could feel that the Scarlet Dimension was helping him to transform the power belonging to the Scarlet Dimension itself into a new power that could supply him with power, maintaining his state and even raising it to the point where he could go head-to-head with the Scarlet Heart. This is really Chen Ming also obtained the Scarlet Heart's memory when he was affected by the Scarlet Heart. He immediately reacted to what was going on. Obviously, the Scarlet Dimension also regarded him as a Scarlet Heart. What is happening now is that the two scarlet creatures of the same kind, which are most common in the Scarlet Dimension, are fighting each other. The surviving scarlet creatures are the creatures that the Scarlet Dimension needs. Of course, it is also possible that this is just a property of the Scarlet Dimension itself. But in short, the Scarlet Dimension believes that the Scarlet Heart needs to go through another life and death battle. So he chose to raise Chen Ming, who was weaker in terms of intuitive strength, to the same level as the Scarlet Heart. Chen Ming has lost all the disadvantages before using the Scarlet Power. And when the Scarlet Heart has not yet completely mastered the phase power and is completely unable to resist these machines growing between its flesh and blood, the fate of the Scarlet Heart is already doomed. Countless machines are operating between the flesh and blood, tearing the Scarlet Heart and devouring its flesh and blood. And the flesh and blood produced by these mechanical structures fills the torn gaps on the Scarlet Heart. The Scarlet Heart is struggling and resisting desperately, but Chen Ming has all the power that the Scarlet Heart has. When it was at the same level as Chen Ming's proficiency in controlling power was completely incomparable to the Scarlet Heart. Gradually, the Scarlet Heart was completely assimilated. Its beating gradually subsided, and the wing-like blood vessels extending from the back of the heart no longer sprayed blood. It became a half-mechanized, half-flesh scarlet mechanical heart. It was no longer a scarlet creature. It had become a derivative of a power controlled by Chen Ming. And at the moment when the Scarlet Heart completely lost its own life, the power given to Chen Ming by the Scarlet Dimension dissipated, and at the same time, he also felt a spiritual connection between him and this huge half-flesh, half-mechanical heart. It was similar to the connection with the Queen of Insects, but the object of the connection had no self-awareness. It was just a symbol of Chen Ming's power in the Scarlet Dimension. It allowed Chen Ming to master a stronger scarlet power, and the degree of mastery of power would be raised to a higher level. At the same time, it would not affect the purity of his own power at all. Chen Ming did not stop there. Under the influence of his psychic power, the chaotic mechanical structures on the Scarlet Heart gradually connected with each other, began to replace the Scarlet Heart, and reactivated the body of the Scarlet Heart. When the mechanized structure almost spread throughout the Scarlet Heart, the previous Scarlet Heart became a thing of the past. At this time, Chen Ming had completely adapted to the environment of the Scarlet Dimension after possessing this heart. Not only did all the effects of the Scarlet Dimension no longer work on him, he could even suppress the characteristics of the Scarlet Dimension itself. He could now completely close the spatial rift between the Scarlet Dimension and the phase, and even the normal universe, leaving no hole to be torn open. The dimensional invasion of the Scarlet Dimension could already be stopped by him alone. Dimensional infection was just a minor sequelae. Chen Ming was ready to deal with these things, but before that, he left the rift of the Scarlet Mechanical Heart, came outside the heart, and looked for the figure of the brainwashed psychic. However, where could he still be seen? He had already run away after noticing the changes in the Scarlet Heart. What a jerk! Chen Ming also realized something about the brainwashed psychic at this time. That is, the brainwashed psychic was lying to him again. Actually, it can't be considered a lie, because the brainwashed psychic was telling the truth. That is, using the Scarlet Power will indeed make the corresponding monsters in the Scarlet Dimension stronger. But the Scarlet Power that the person who controls the Scarlet Power controls is also the best way to kill the Scarlet creatures. Because the rules of the Scarlet Dimension are there. As long as you can withstand the power of the Scarlet Dimension, then after accepting this power, relying on your own familiarity with your own power, killing the corresponding Scarlet creatures is definitely not a problem. The brainwashed psychic probably used the Scarlet Power when facing his Scarlet Brain, but gave up using this power after noticing that the Scarlet Brain became stronger. Eventually, he became neither human nor ghost. But later, he merged with the Scarlet Brain and was in a half-dead state. He must know what kind of power is best to deal with the Scarlet creatures. He specifically mentioned this, but he didn't say the more important sentence. Chen Ming subconsciously ignored the use of Scarlet Power as a targeted attack method. Only after most of his abilities were ineffective did he try to use the scarlet power to protect himself. As a result, he was forced to actively throw himself into the rift. He learned about the memories of the Scarlet Heart and the real means to deal with the scarlet creatures. It's really deadly to tell the truth, half a sentence. Chen Ming took a look at the last location of the brainwashed psychic and temporarily gave up looking for him. It's more difficult to find someone in the scarlet dimension than to find a needle in a haystack. Anyway, he was not in a hurry, because he had something more important to do. A scarlet star map suddenly appeared in front of Chen Ming. This was the information given to him by the brainwashed psychic before. Although the brainwashed psychic deliberately said half a sentence to trick him, he did tell the truth all the time. There is a great possibility that the survivors are really in the area he circled. He wants to see where the survivors can hide. Chen Ming tore the space rift open, and the scarlet matter seemed to stay in the scarlet dimension obediently at this moment, without any violation of the phase space. But in fact, these scarlet substances are struggling frantically, trying to break away from Chen Ming's restrictions and invade the phase space. Once Chen Ming relaxes his supervision, these scarlet substances will still do what they like most. But it doesn't matter. As long as Chen Ming is still there, this situation will not happen. No matter what the process is, as long as the result is good, it is enough. Chen Ming stepped out of the scarlet rift, picked up the body he had just lost, and returned to the normal universe again. However, the scarlet breath on his body still did not dissipate, and the visible blood-red color was entangled around him. The Minister of Psychic Energy, who was waiting anxiously on the spot, saw the space rift suddenly open, and the scarlet light came out of it, and his heart almost jumped out. Seeing that it was Chen Ming who came out, the heart that was lifted was half relieved. "You are back, are you okay?" Chen Ming waved his hand to signal the Minister of Psychic Energy not to get too close to him. At the same time, a circle of scarlet was released to wrap the cabin they were in. The brainwashed psychic said before that the survivors were afraid of scarlet. Then it should be no problem to use scarlet material to isolate the surrounding environment. However, Chen Ming always felt that the brainwashed psychic had hidden half a sentence, so he did not completely believe him. Isolation is isolation, and he would not say anything that should not be said. "It's okay, I just used some other abilities to make my power a little restrained, and it will recover after a while." "That's good." Seeing that Chen Ming was in good condition, the minister's heart was completely relieved and asked, "What are your plans next?" "Plan?" Chen Ming has of course thought of a plan. This is not only because the brainwashed psychic said the truth. It is also because he can no longer restrain his power. The color of the blood rings around him is becoming more and more intense, and the number is also increasing unrestricted. After he destroyed the Scarlet Heart and seized the power of the Scarlet Heart, this power is in a restricted state in the Scarlet and will not be dispersed at will. But after leaving Scarlet, the huge spiritual power that Scarlet Heart brought to Chen Ming when he died still lingered around Chen Ming, becoming part of Chen Ming's power. Chen Ming's current psychic power base has always been stuck at the level of a level 5 psychic, and the power he can control has an upper limit. This has led to him being in a state of being full. These scarlet powers outside cannot be restrained at all. If not handled in time, this power will soon explode completely. He needs a place to consume these excess powers. The survivors are the best targets. "Minister Luo, why don't you go back first? Or should I send you to the urban planet? My super body is a little useful here." Chen Ming's highly suggestive words made the Minister of Psychic Energy guess what Chen Ming was going to do. He also realized that the survivors might also guess what Chen Ming meant. However, he took another look at the scarlet power around him that reflected the cabin red and asked, "How many times will the time acceleration of the super body be accelerated?" Chen Ming thought for a while and said, "At least 1,200 times. 3 seconds is equal to 1 hour." The Minister of Psychic Energy calculated that 1 minute on the ship was equivalent to almost 1 day. Chen Ming looked like he was going to do something. It would take at least 2 or 3 hours to complete the trip. Although time acceleration is normal for his body sense, it is better to avoid things that shorten his life by 2 months. "Let me go." "Okay." Chen Ming decisively made a shuttle and handed it to the minister, leaving him above the urban planet. After that, Whether he continued to look around on the ruined urban planet or went to other places, it was up to him. Chen Ming himself did not waste any more time and immediately made the superbody move. A white and red track with a dangerous atmosphere leading to other galaxies was left above the city planet. Chen Ming opened the star map program on the spacecraft halfway, and at the same time, he had a scarlet star map at hand. One was recorded by himself, and the other was the star map given by the brainwashed psychic. Because there were certain errors in the details of the star map given by the brainwashed psychic, it was necessary to compare and refer to the normal star map. After all, he was not a professional in star mapping, so it was normal to have some small errors. The important thing was the range he gave. As long as there was no problem with this range, everything would be fine. Chen Ming quickly redrew a circle on the star map where the survivors might exist. However, he still could not see what exactly affected this range. At most, he could see that the center of this range was the galaxy where he found the city planet. If this is true, it means that there may be something in this galaxy that is affecting the survivors. That's why they stayed here and couldn't get away. And this galaxy is marked in the underground of the Shining Civilization Memorial. So the survivors should be related to the survivors of the Shining Civilization who built the cultural memorial. But no. With doubts and questions, Chen Ming decided to give priority to finding the survivors. After all, the galaxies are there and will not run away, but once the survivors react, they can use the previous escape method to escape freely between so many galaxies within this range. It is even possible that they don't need to be between galaxies. They can just find a corner without stars and squat without being discovered. Speed is what he must pursue now. So Chen Ming quickly planned a trajectory on the star map that can run through all the galaxies within the range of the star map. The rest is to set up the automatic driving system and slow down slightly when passing each galaxy, so that he has time to cover the entire galaxy with his mental power. To search for traces of the survivors' space station. Under the psychic effect of the superbody accelerating time, time is the thing Chen Ming lacks the least now. However, Chen Ming still remembers the situation when he found the survivor space station before. He had already driven the superbody fast enough, but he still couldn't catch the space station that suddenly disappeared. This time, Chen Ming will learn from the previous lesson and use a faster speed. To achieve a faster speed, Chen Ming does not need any key breakthrough in the core technology of the time flow. What he has to do is also very simple, that is, to use the most basic ability of his psychic power to overload the operating time flow core and achieve the effect of overclocking, so as to obtain a faster speed. The faster the flow of time will lead to an increase in time consumption. But Chen Ming is not short of time at all. At the same time, overclocking will make the time flow core unstable and may be damaged. That is even less of a problem. Chen Ming's psychic power is least afraid of equipment damage, especially this kind of damage without missing materials. As long as there is no lack of materials, he consumes only pure mental power to repair things, and there will be no need for any materials. He now has so much mental power that he is about to dye the super body red, and mental power is also not a problem at all. So much so that Chen Ming even planned to leave some spiritual power on every planet he passed by in the future, to keep him monitoring the situation in the galaxy. There was no need to monitor the galaxy very accurately, just to roughly know whether there were any extra space stations in the galaxy. The space station of the survivors looked special. If he ran away again this time, the spiritual power left behind would save him from going back. On the way to the galaxy, that was the starting point of the investigation. Chen Ming had already gradually increased the original acceleration of about 1,200 times to 3,000 times. And this number was still rising wildly, and finally fixed at 6,367 times. This was not Chen Ming's limit, but the limit of the time stream core. When the time stream core was overloaded to this extent, its own structure was almost close to collapse at any time, and it was purely supported by Chen Ming's spiritual power. If the overload level is higher, the structure of the time stream core will be completely unsustainable. Even if Chen Ming's psychic energy is there to repair it all the time, it cannot guarantee stability. It will just break directly and cannot maintain its operating state at all. Even if psychic energy is used to repair it, It will only repair it from a completely damaged state, not from a near-damaged state, and it needs to be restarted. If it is restarted, the effect will not be good. Therefore, the acceleration of the time stream core can basically only be maintained at this multiple, which is at least 5 times the difference compared to the basic time acceleration effect. This speed should be enough to catch up with the speed at which the space station of the survivors disappears. However, there are also disadvantages brought by this speed. That is, Chen Ming needs to keep his full attention on the surrounding cosmic environment where the super body passes to confirm what kind of things exist in the cosmic environment. Although Chen Ming's own consciousness was also accelerated, the mental power he released outside the spacecraft would not. At most, there will be a certain amount of acceleration effect left when leaving the hull, but this effect is not long-lasting and unstable. Therefore, he needs to control the scope of his mental power as much as possible to ensure monitoring of the surrounding cosmic environment. Moreover, Chen Ming also felt a stronger sense of consciousness split than before, which made people feel a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, this sense of split could not have any actual impact on him now. After all, if we have to talk about the sense of split, then the sense of split between him and the scarlet mechanical heart is the strongest. Didn't he also bear it and completely control it? The super body accelerated to the extreme under the extreme overload of the time flow core. It can almost be said that Chen Ming had arrived at the target galaxy just after he set off from the urban planet. Then, Chen Ming unexpectedly discovered that there was a space station in an empty area outside the galaxy where he started. Its style was exactly the same as the one Chen Ming had seen before. Chen Ming really didn't expect his luck to be so good. The first target successfully locked the survivor. The information given by the brainwashed psychic was correct, otherwise the survivor would not have to be restricted to this area. Although he likes to say half of the words said by the brainwashed psychic are indeed true. This situation is the benefit that Chen Ming has gained by actively listening to the trash talk of the brainwashed psychic. It is also the result of Chen Ming making a decision that slightly changed his thinking. Because the starting point he chose was not the galaxy near the galaxy of the city planet where he started, but the galaxy farthest from the city planet galaxy. That is, the galaxy at the edge of the range drawn by the brainwashed psychic. Because he felt that any intelligent creature would have a habit when avoiding danger, that is, the more hidden the better, the farther the better. Under the cosmic environment, the hidden places are of course those empty areas without stars shining and various celestial bodies acting as the surface. And the actual distance is also very easy to achieve. Most people would not think that Chen Ming would ignore the nearby galaxies, or even not even take a look at them, and just go straight to the galaxy farthest from the city planet galaxy. So Chen Ming used reverse thinking to consider the possible hiding places of the survivors and tried it. The result is now. Chen Ming just chose the right direction on the entire sphere of the three-dimensional space station in the universe and found the survivors' space station very smoothly. And the survivors may not even have time to react. Chen Ming rushed to the space station under the thousands of times of time acceleration. Chen Ming considered directly colliding with it, and his psychic power could completely repair the damaged superbody. But he couldn't do that, because the actual speed of the superbody in the normal universe is 99% of the speed of light. This is the degree to which Chen Ming accelerated the superbody to ensure that the superbody can exert its maximum speed. It is not that the superbody maintained a speed that would not affect its own mass too much in order to ensure combat effectiveness. At this speed, the mass void effect has taken effect, and the actual collision effect will not be too good. So Chen Ming had to choose another less direct, but equally violent method. At this time, the superbody had been dyed blood red by Chen Ming's overflowing scarlet power, and it pounced on the space station like a real scarlet creature that invaded the normal universe. This time Chen Ming no longer needed to hold back. All he had to do was to completely destroy the survivors. Just before Chen Ming launched an attack on the survivors' space station. The survivors' space station, which had not been quiet for long, became lively again. The survivors gathered together again, but this time it was not Nano who did it, but Zhou Bo. Ever since Chen Ming picked up the survivor communicator and Nano took the initiative to contact Chen Ming, the survivors have basically been losing something instead of gaining something. As a leader, Nano knew that the times had changed. The shining civilization had been destroyed for many years, and it was no longer possible to do things according to the previous ideas. So all he did was to test the outside world while ensuring safety. Even if the object of the test was the human empire, a civilization whose own technological level was far behind theirs, he did not dare to take the initiative to infiltrate the empire. Because there is still Chen Ming guarding the entrance and exit of the wormhole, and there are more unknown powerful psychics in the empire. Many survivors have already had opinions about his style of doing things. They think Nano is weak. But Nano did not explain too much. He just did what he should do and continued to lead the survivors with his past prestige. Test the empire and Chen Ming little by little. Until later, Chen Ming, an already extremely powerful psychic, continued to show more powerful strength. He knew that Chen Ming was the real danger in front of them. So his decision was to actively abandon everything and give up unnecessary fantasies, just to make his own people alert and hide, waiting for the opportunity to come. However, it was precisely because of his decision that all the Leviathans controlled by the survivors died, and they lost all the cutting-edge combat power they currently had, and they also lost their initiative. Nano even planned to let the survivors hide directly beside the queen, which was extremely weak in the eyes of other survivors. All the previous behaviors have made the survivors dissatisfied. Now the anger caused by what just happened broke out again under Zhou Bo's leadership. They must let Nano give an explanation. Nano did not respond directly. He chose to remain silent. Although he was angry and puzzled in his heart, all that was left was a sigh. If the other survivors did not trust him, and he could not do it, then let others try. The hand with a gleaming metallic luster in the dark space station was raised from the control center of the space station, which symbolized the power of the survivors. Just when he was about to speak his mind, a red shadow appeared near the space station. A threatening force with a terrifying aura had enveloped the space station. Before the survivors could react, the space station around their space station collapsed completely. The rift from the normal universe to the scarlet dimension opened here, forming a ring of space that completely enveloped the space station and isolated everything. A huge half-mechanical, half-flesh figure was reflected in the entire rift. Even without the existence of a medium, the survivors on the space station seemed to hear a heavy heartbeat across the vacuum of the universe at this moment. At this moment, Nano's hand had just been raised, and Zhou Bo's hand had already pressed it impatiently. But Zhou Bo's hand had not yet completely pressed on the main control center. The originally pitch-black interior of the space station was filled with light from the cosmic environment and the scarlet dimension. The entire space station was torn from one-third of the space station side by Chen Ming's scarlet power, exposing the core of the space station. The scarlet matter that tore the space station directly swallowed up that one-third of the space station. The scarlet and the machinery instantly devoured and assimilated these structures, leaving no trace. And Zhou Bo still had only the hand that had just pressed on the main control center left on the space station. One-third of the space station was torn apart and assimilated. The interwoven structure of flesh and blood and machinery was still frantically corroding the remaining half of the space station. The light outside the space station reflected the appearance of Nano inside the space station. As the main species of the shining civilization, Nano has almost the same biological structure as humans, except for a slight difference in facial structure. But at the level of individual differences in species, there is no obvious difference between them and humans. However, this is just the general appearance of Chen Ming. Their specific appearance is still different from that of humans. The whole body of Nano is shining with pure metallic luster, without any hair or clothes covering it, and there is no organ indicating gender. There are only muscle lines that show the beauty of the human body, like ancient Greek sculptures. This is certainly not a natural body, and those muscle lines are not real muscle lines. As for what it is, Chen Ming has already guessed it, and he should have an answer soon. At this time, Nano decisively pulled Zhou Bo's hand on the control center away, threw it aside, and regained control of the space station. The hand belonging to Zhou Bo fell on the space station, and a clear metal collision sound was emitted along the internal structure of the space station. Other than that, the space station was silent. Even though the outside was a scarlet that could drive people crazy at a glance, the survivors did not seem to communicate too much. At least not in Chen Ming's eyes. Of course, this was just an appearance. The panicked shouts of the survivors were still filling Nano's ears, and they called his name as if they had grabbed the only life-saving straw. For a moment, Nano's mind flashed the idea of giving up and letting the scarlet devour the space station completely. But he didn't do it in the end. Even though the other survivors were still doubting him and didn't trust him just a few seconds ago. But his identity and his responsibilities made it impossible for him to make such a decision. He wanted to activate the escape function of the space station and let the space station escape like the last time it was discovered by Chen Ming. But Chen Ming, who was on the superbody, could clearly see any changes on the space station with the acceleration of the time flow core. Before Nano had any action, he had quietly entered the space station. Relying on the residual acceleration effect when the time flow core effect was removed, punched his chest with a scarlet punch. He did not feel the feeling of piercing the body of a living being. Along with Chen Ming's hand, some fine iron sand pierced through. Chen Ming's voice passed through his arm and into Nano's body. Nano. As expected, Nano looked down at the ground of the space station. The iron sand that had just been punched out had all turned into a structure interwoven with flesh and machinery, and his body was also undergoing such changes. He reluctantly turned his head and looked at the tall figure wrapped in biological armor behind him and asked, Chen Ming, are you surprised? When you contacted me, you should have thought of today. I thought about it, and I tried to change it, but the result was not ideal. Nano, who was strung on Chen Ming's arm like a string of candied haws, suddenly turned into a pool of iron sand and escaped from Chen Ming's restrictions. He abandoned the part of the nanomachine that was affected by Chen Ming's scarlet and condensed into the original human form again. Psychic fluctuations emerged, and lines like nerves appeared on the surface of his metallic skin. The speed of Nano's activities suddenly increased. It almost completely disappeared from Chen Ming's field of vision. Only mental perception could catch up with his speed. Accelerate psychic energy? As soon as Chen Ming finished speaking, he felt that the temperature around him was rising rapidly. He was in a vacuum, and there was almost no medium to absorb heat, but the temperature suddenly rose a lot. Obviously, this was the effect of Nano's psychic energy. His psychic energy accelerated the examples around Chen Ming and caused entropy increase. However, Chen Ming had seen a lot of means of entropy increase. The best way to deal with this kind of entropy increase caused by simply accelerating particles is to take 2 steps to the side. Those accelerated particles will lose a lot of speed when they change their positions drastically. Even if you don't walk, this level of heat can't cause effective damage to Chen Ming at all. So Chen Ming didn't care about Nano's attack at this time. What he was doing was trying to lock Nano's position. No matter how fast Nano was, it would still be limited by the surrounding terrain and environmental conditions. And when Chen Ming locked Nano and predicted the next time Nano would approach the surrounding terrain wall, Chen Ming moved. A simple punch with a scarlet breath hit Nano's face. The metal head exploded instantly and exploded into debris on the ground. These debris were quickly incubated by Scarlet, and even Nano's body showed signs of Scarlet corruption. However, Nano was not fatally affected by this. He cleared the Scarlet corruption on his body and made a slightly dull sound. You didn't use the time flow core technology. Why not? The voice spread along the floor under his feet, and Chen Ming, as a psychic, easily heard the voice. The reason why he doesn't use the time flow core is, of course, because the time flow core is too large. The core of time flow is 3 meters in diameter. Although it is not large compared to the super body, it is not something that Chen Ming can easily bring out. But Chen Ming didn't reply. If it was with the brainwashed psyker, he might actually be in the mood to talk, but with Nano, the survivor, he couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense. When Nami tried to distance himself from him, he continued to follow up and hit Nami's body with another punch. This punch completely shattered Nano's body, and a large amount of scarlet material exploded from Nano's body. However, Nano was still not completely dead. His 4 remaining broken limbs suddenly scattered into iron sand-like nano-robots and escaped along the gap that was torn apart in the space station just now. Chen Ming followed immediately and saw that the nanorobots that made up the nanometers had completely dispersed and no longer formed a human form, just floating in the cosmic environment. He looked like he had really given up on escaping. But at this time, the situation outside the space station has obviously become worse than before. Scarlet is expanding crazily, expanding the rift leading to the normal universe. Although all the scarlet material leading to the outside of the spherical crack that surrounded the space station was controlled by the scarlet mechanical heart, Chen Ming did not impose any restrictions on the inside of the spherical crack. Scarlet will soon engulf the station completely. Even if Nami wanted to escape, there was absolutely no way to escape. Nami suddenly seemed to realize this and suddenly came together again. He looked at Chen Ming, his expression neither sad nor happy. Just when Chen Ming thought that Nami had any backup plans, he suddenly raised his hands, as if he had given up resistance. Question mark. Chen Ming wanted to punch Nami again to hear what he wanted to do. He found that the space station behind him suddenly began to change like the last time he came here. The entire space station is turning into dust and disappearing, and is about to leave the area that has been sealed by the Scarlet Rift. Nano was just luring Chen Ming to leave the space station so that other survivors could control the space station and escape. For example, the remaining hand that Chen Ming just saw should still have self-awareness. As long as all the nanorobots on the body are not directly killed, nanomechanical life forms like the survivors have the possibility of recovery. It should be that hand that controlled the space station to activate the escape equipment and conduct a space transfer. Chen Ming did not go back to stop him, because he knew there was nothing he could do to stop the process once it started. But the inability to stop it this time was different from the last time. Last time, Chen Ming didn't have time to stop him. But this time, Chen Ming took the initiative and did not impose restrictions on the space station and allowed them to escape. This way he can feel the entire process more clearly. Then, he discovered the secret of the survivors' escape. They did use space-type technology, but the space they escaped from was not any known space dimension, but an independent, narrow dimension. An artificial dimension used by Shining Civilization itself to isolate any people and spaceships that are not allowed by the dimension. No wonder Chen Ming has been unable to trace his traces before, and his psychic fluctuations have not been recorded in this dimension. What the power of the Scarlet Dimension is best at is invading other dimensions. But Chen Ming was not in a hurry to do so, because there was still an nanometer left in front of him at this time. When Chen Ming looked at him, he released some harmless-looking nanorobots in Chen Ming's direction, signaling Chen Ming to accept them. Nami definitely couldn't run away, but the remaining hand that Chen Ming saw before could survive. So it would be completely safe for Nami to leave some backup of his body on the space station and rely on those backups to recover as before. It's possible. So Chen Ming accepted these nanorobots without taking action directly. This pile of nanorobots immediately formed a mechanical vocal organ, transmitting what Nano said. You failed. At this time, Chen Ming didn't mind chatting with Nami and asked, "How can you tell that I failed? Our space station has escaped from here. Everyone has realized how powerful you are and will no longer have any form of contact or conflict with you. As long as we survive, you failed." "Maybe," Chen Ming said noncommittally. "So your role is to act as bait? You should be the leader of the survivors, right?" "It was. How long ago?" "In your human time, it was 3 minutes ago." Chen Ming was silent, but Nami was obviously unhappy about something he didn't want to say. What he wanted to say was obviously impossible to say to the same kind of people, so he could only say it to his enemy, Chen Ming. Their vision is limited by the past. It is too narrow, and they cannot see how powerful you are. I saw it, so I made a lot of preparations, but no one else could understand these preparations. I am the only one who will bear the consequences of the direct loss. Chen Ming thought about it and asked, "It seems that most of you survivors don't take me seriously, so you want to test me with Leviathan. No matter what the result is, it will be good for you, right?" "Right. If you are killed by the Guardians, it will be the best outcome for us survivors as a whole." If you kill the Guardians, it will be the best outcome for me. On the contrary, it will be troublesome for you and the Guardians to be deadlocked there, because I can't be sure whether you are acting or really that strong. The backlash of my decision may be more serious. Other survivors will definitely want to attack you when the Guardians attack you. Once you pretend to be evenly matched, our ending will definitely not be much better. Fortunately, you acted decisively and you do have great power. But I feel like I seem to have seen some deviations. You are very powerful, but not as powerful as I imagined. Chen Ming asked back, how strong do you think I am? It means that as long as you are given the opportunity to get close to us, we will never have the possibility of turning over. Chen Ming smiled subconsciously when he heard this. Nano is really a smart shining civilization person. He really deduced the effect of Chen Ming's psychic power when he restricted his power in all aspects and kept testing it. Unfortunately, he couldn't stick to his idea in the end. If you ask me, your vision is just a little higher than your peers, and you are also limited by the glory of the past. What gave you the illusion that I can't do what you said? What gave you the confidence that you, the survivors, as mechanical life, can escape from my hands? Nano didn't believe Chen Ming's words at this time and said, then why didn't you control the space station just now? Chen Ming didn't answer this question. The reason why he didn't directly control the space station was very simple. That is, his control method was still limited. As long as the space station is divided into several different module structures, and there is no direct connection between them, his psychic power cannot completely control the space station. If he can't ensure that the space station is 100% controlled, he won't gamble whether the survivors will have any means of self-destruction. And when our space station enters an independent dimension, all unmarked things will be left behind. Even microorganisms are the same. Your psychic-controlled things are also left behind. You can no longer keep up with the space station. They will hide until the day they can fight back. Chen Ming smiled. The scarlet rifts around him have gradually closed after escaping from the space station, but the scarlet power on his body continues to grow stronger. No dimension can escape the invasion of scarlet. Suddenly, a faint psychic wave appeared in his hand, almost imperceptible. Immediately afterwards, the small group of nanorobots used for sound that Nano personally controlled with stable mental power lost control at this moment. Just a little bit of psychic wave contact completely took away the control of this part of the nanorobot belonging to Nano. A visible change of expression appeared on Nano's metal face. He turned around and wanted to escape, wanting to use the antimatter technology in his own nanomechanical structure to annihilate himself. But Chen Ming's hand had already touched his body. 1 minute later, the galaxy where the city planet was previously located. Near the star in the galaxy, there is an asteroid that is not even a planet and sits on the same table as Pluto. Next to this asteroid, a large amount of sand-like objects suddenly emerged from the void and quickly gathered together. Formed a space station that has lost more than half of its structure, but it seems that the gap has been barely repaired. Inside the space station, Zhou Bo and Nano, two nanorobots, are standing together in the main control room of the space station that was torn apart by Chen Ming's scarlet power. The Nano here is just as Chen Ming guessed before. It is a part of Nano that was left before leaving the space station, or even earlier, and it has recovered after self-repair. Although it seems that there are only the two of them, all the survivors throughout the space station are watching this scene in the main control room. When the space station completely left the dimension built by the shining civilization, Nano was the first to speak. Confirm that part of my body has completely lost contact. The last news was that Chen Ming used the psychic effect of the Scarlet Dimension to destroy his consciousness, and he failed to self-destruct. Chen Ming's psychic effect is indeed limited, but there will definitely be a lot of information leaked out, and there should be monitors left by Chen Ming in the galaxy. We must hurry up. We have lost a lot of companions, and we can't continue to lose. Yes. Zhobo no longer has the confidence to question Nano before, and he has returned the authority to Nano. The reason why he is still here instead of watching like other survivors is just to prove that Nano is right. Of course, the survivors still put business first. As soon as they finished speaking, the space station sent a special communication signal to the planet. and this signal was responded to almost instantly. The surface layer at the two magnetic field poles of the asteroid suddenly began to collapse, as if it was affected by a sudden gravity at the core of the asteroid. No, not collapse, but collapse. The soil layer on the surface and the rock layer underground were all collapsed towards the inside of the asteroid by this sudden gravity. When the soil and rocks were swallowed by this collapsing force, a giant structure with an overall appearance of an oil lamp was exposed inside the asteroid. The umbrella structure on the top drooped slightly, half protecting the open structure in the middle, and at the same time, such a structure could also allow it to be completely covered by the structure of the asteroid itself. When the rocks and soil were almost cleared, the inside of the structure revealed something that Chen Ming was very familiar with. A singularity. It was releasing a huge attraction, completely erasing everything else on the asteroid. Soon, the umbrella structure on the top of the giant structure opened, and light pollution with energy concentration appeared on the surface. The attraction of the singularity gradually stabilized, and it seemed that it would be able to pass through soon. Arrived at the unknown location behind. So this is the special stargate you mentioned? Chen Ming's voice sounded on the superbody. At this time, the superbody was hovering at a position not far from the stargate in the asteroid. The surface of the superbody is covered with a layer of nanorobots, which has a dual stealth effect at the physical and psychic levels. And it is the part of the nanorobots controlled by Chen Ming's psychic power that helped to construct this layer of nanorobots. After Chen Ming asked this question, the nanorobots immediately said, "Yes, by connecting the coordinates of the stargate here and the destination, you can reach a new dimension built by ourselves from here. This new dimension is different from the dimension we used when escaping from the space station. It is more private. Hide there and don't come out until the Queen revives. This is the only way out I judged when facing you. The other one, I must have regained control of the space station now, and I am promoting this plan." Chen Ming nodded slightly and said, "Because of your words, I changed my mind about taking action directly from your space station through the dimension. I hope the situation later is worth it for me to do so. I can't say whether it is worth it, but this is definitely an opportunity. Whether you can grasp it depends on you." Chen Ming did not comment on this. He took a look at the space station outside, which was extremely slow due to the time acceleration of the superbody, and took this opportunity to ask, "So how strong is the Queen?" "I don't know. I only know that she is the most powerful psychic in our shining civilization, and no one knows how strong she is. I suggest you really prepare before you take action. Here it comes." Nano was interrupted by Chen Ming before he finished speaking. Because the singularity in the special stargate has been completely stable at this time, the space station also began to move, and the speed is quite fast, and it will soon enter the stargate. Chen Ming wanted to try to follow in, but he didn't do it. Just relying on the effect of the superbody's time flow core to accelerate the psychic energy again, his mental power was distributed between the space station and the stargate by the acceleration effect of the time flow core, tearing the space again, bringing Scarlet back to the normal universe, covering the space station. This time, the target of the survivors is in sight, and they can no longer use the way of escaping to that dimension to avoid Chen Ming's tracking. But at the moment when the rift was completely opened, at the top of the special stargate frame outside the just stabilized singularity, there appeared a presence that made Chen Ming feel extremely dangerous. In his spiritual perception, what gave him such a sense of danger was a clearly feminine nanomechanical broken arm. It was not even a complete person. Chen Ming's face was serious, but he was not surprised. He knew what it was. This was what Nano said, a countermeasure left by their queen before she fell asleep, used to protect the survivors when necessary. This was left by the most powerful psychic who ruled a powerful civilization. This is the queen's hand. It was the reason why Chen Ming did this. Chen Ming wanted to bet on a bigger wave. Although the value of the survivors had been squeezed out by Nano, as long as the remaining survivors were placed in this galaxy, more value could be squeezed out. The Queen's hand was a countermeasure weapon left by the Shining Queen, and only the master of the survivors' space station had the authority to awaken it. And Chen Ming's psychic power had the possibility of controlling it. The first moment the Queen's hand appeared, She extended her index finger in the direction of the space station. It seemed to be locking onto those who were hostile to the survivors. The moment the target was the Scarlet Rifts. The Queen's hand opened the slender fingers that shone with metallic color and grasped them in the air in the direction of the space station. A giant phantom hand made of psychic energy also completely grasped the area torn by the Scarlet Rift in its hand at this moment. Like grasping a piece of paper, it crumpled the Scarlet into a mess. The space station separated by the Scarlet was not affected by this power at all. It even moved towards the special Stargate at a faster speed while the Queen's hand took effect. The Scarlet Rifts held in the palm of the Phantom created by the Queen's hand were not directly crushed. The power of Scarlet is being continuously released from another dimension into the normal universe. A heartbeat sounded in the palm of the Queen's hand. The hand that was clenched involuntarily loosened. But the next moment, the Queen's hand clenched again as if it was offended and completely crushed the Scarlet power back to the Scarlet dimension. The Scarlet mechanical heart of Chen Ming was cracked under the backlash of this power. However, Chen Ming's attention was not on the Scarlet at this time. His attention was all on the main body of the Queen's hand. The super body he controlled was also lurking in the shadows and constantly approaching the Stargate. When the Scarlet mechanical heart was repelled by the Queen's power acted on the phantom giant hand at the strongest moment. Chen Ming broke away from the super body, relying on the aftermath of the time acceleration psychic effect brought by the time flow core, rushed to the Queen's hand and touched it. But just when Chen Ming wanted to control the Queen's hand with his own psychic power. What? Chen Ming's psychic power penetrated into the Queen's hand, but failed to exert its power on it. The Queen's hand was still able to move freely and also noticed Chen Ming's existence. The shadow of the giant hand that was originally clenched on the Scarlet Rift disappeared, and the power returned to the Queen's hand. The Queen's hand just made a light flapping motion and directly shattered the biological armor on Chen Ming's body. Even the psychic shield he maintained on the side of his body was penetrated by this powerful force. Most of his internal organs and bones were directly shattered. Chen Ming spit out a mouthful of blood full of organs. He quickly used psychic energy to repair his injured body. During this process, his eyes were fixed on the direction of the Queen's hand, thinking constantly. In the past, Chen Ming also had situations where psychic energy could not control certain mechanical equipment. For example, when facing the mechanical race. When he was still very weak, he could not use psychic energy to directly control those mechanical races in the psychic hive mind network of the mechanical race. Because psychic energy would hinder his power, and the psychic strength of the psychic hive mind network far exceeded what he once was. In fact, the survivor's previous speculation was correct. Psychic energy would indeed affect Chen Ming's psychic energy use. But it must be a psychic power far exceeding Chen Ming's strength. So now Chen Ming has always thought that there is nothing in the world that can stop his psychic power. But the Queen's hand appeared in front of him when he was extremely proud. He had no way to control this mechanical existence with psychic power far exceeding his own. However, his power still left scarlet infection marks on the arm of the Queen's hand. This hand seemed to look at its scarlet-affected wound for a moment. But it did not do anything about it. It just pointed its finger at the Scarlet Rift that had just been released, but began to expand again. This time, it was no longer a giant hand that appeared at the edge of the Scarlet Rift, but a humanoid phantom that contained all the psychic power left by the Queen's hand. The phantom's eyes were dull, but it stayed near the space station for a moment with a purpose, and then rushed into the Scarlet Rift the next moment and completely closed the Scarlet Rift. The surrounding space was also forcibly smoothed and stabilized, and there was no possibility of reopening the cracks in a short period of time. Before Chen Ming could see what would happen in the Scarlet, he saw that the Queen's hand, which was originally suspended near the Stargate, had lost the psychic power stored in it and turned into an ordinary nanomechanical arm. And it was still being corroded by the Scarlet that had just been stained. Chen Ming quickly controlled the nanomechanical arm that had lost its power and wiped out the influence of the Scarlet power on it. Then he looked elsewhere and saw that the space station had also disappeared from its previous position, leaving only some space fluctuations remaining on the special Stargate. The Stargate was still there, but the singularity had been extinguished at this time, and it seemed that it could no longer open the passage to another dimension. Chen Ming reached out to touch the stargate with some disbelief and controlled it. However, he found that the way to activate this stargate was extremely special. He could not rely on it to activate it by itself. Even if Chen Ming's psychic power was there, he could not change the design problem. If you want to use it, you must open another special stargate that corresponds to it. And the location of the other special stargate is only in the new dimension that Nano said. The nanorobot left by Nano on Chen Ming suddenly spoke. Without the information of that closed dimension, the stargate cannot be oriented. Even if you want to determine the coordinates of the other side of the stargate by studying the stargate, it will be useless. My goal has been achieved, and you have also seen the power of the Queen. Do you still have the confidence to win? Chen Ming's heart sank when he heard this. He really didn't expect that the Queen of the survivors would have such power. Just one arm left could block his power. But after all, she was the Queen of the Shining Civilization, a civilization that was extremely prosperous compared to the Empire. She should have such power. So Chen Ming had nothing to say. His power was also not at its peak. His battleship was still parked in the giant dock. It's just the Queen. As he said this, he glanced at the stargate and then at the nanomechanical arm in his hand, and he was not too discouraged. After all, he had thought it through before doing this, and the value he could get from the survivors had been completely obtained from Nano. What he was doing now was just gambling. If he won, everyone was happy. If he lost, he would just let go some survivors who were not very powerful, so that they could report his power to the Queen. But their understanding of his power was one-sided. And even if they were all left, when the Queen of the survivors woke up, she would be alert to the situation outside because no one was there to greet her. She might even be more alert than if she had known a wrong cognition. So no matter what the result is, it will not make much difference to future development. The survivors? Just a lost dog. As long as the Stargate is still here, sooner or later, I will have people research the way to that dimension, and sooner or later this Stargate will be activated. The survivors will either surrender or perish. Chen Ming returned to the Gaia galaxy soon after. Things appear to be over for the remnants for now. They hid in their independent dimension, and there would be absolutely no movement until their queen awakened. But others don't know this. The survivors cannot disappear without reason. So Chen Ming had to go and explain to the Minister of Psychics what had just happened. After returning to the Gaia galaxy, Chen Ming went directly to the urban planet and found the Minister of Psychic Energy. The Minister of Psychics was currently in the governor's office in the governor's mansion, flipping through various documents here. Seeing Chen Ming walk into the office, he immediately put down the document and asked, "Is it solved?" "Solved. What's the result?" "The person is not dead yet and is hiding from them, but the things that should be taken have been obtained. From today on, all the technologies of Shining Civilization belong to us humans. I will sort them out and share them all later." The Minister of Psychics restrained some of his familiar attitude towards Chen Ming and bowed slightly to Chen Ming solemnly. However, Chen Ming just stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder and said, "Promoted to the Empire as soon as possible. The Machinery clan will not give us too much time. The superbody is coming, and the fleet behind it must be coming soon." "I know. Well, also, didn't you ask me to take care of the cultural center before? Now there are results." "So fast." "Yes, the reason is very simple. You will know when you listen to me." Chen Ming took out the historical document he had found to decipher from the history office of the governor's mansion, put the deciphered content on the terminal, and displayed it. Previously, he had not shown all the documents that Chen Ming had obtained through psychic repair, including this document, to the Minister of Psychics. Because those documents allow the survivors to see the special effects of his psychic powers. But now all the survivors have fled. The document has been deciphered. In addition, there are also interactions with Nano and the situation in those ruins. Chen Ming can completely explain the history of the survivors to the Minister of Psychics through this document. "Have you seen it?" "Have seen it." "What exactly did you say?" "It's quite interesting. It would be better if you see it for yourself." Seeing that Chen Ming was showing off, the Minister of Psychics simply lowered his head and looked at the documents on the terminal that Chen Ming placed in front of him. The content of this document is not an extremely written record of historical facts, but but a diary-like log written by someone himself. June 57, Shining Year 7178. 3 years have passed since the war began. I have been assigned to do this work of compiling and revising the historical diary to ensure that even if we perish, our history will still be passed down. What you're saying is, I'm just a small border clerk, but why are you asking me to do this kind of thing? We have no one available anymore. There is a lot of information hidden in just the first paragraph. The period of the year unit of the Shining Civilization is about 1.15 times longer than the human year, because the revolution period of their parent star is 1.15 times longer than the Earth. The parent star has satellites with a 60-day revolution period, so their year has 420 days, 1 month has 60 days, and 1 year has 7 months, but their rotation periods are almost the same. This makes Shining Civilization and human civilization actually have relatively similar calendars in basic terms. The 3 years of Shining Civilization are about 1,260 days. It's obviously very unusual that it took so long after the war started for a clerk to record history. Either no one in the entire Shining Civilization did this before, or the person who did it has died and all the records have been lost, and the records need to be restarted. After hearing Chen Ming's words, the psychic minister immediately said, "You don't need to think about it to know what's going to happen next, right?" I think so too, and the historical records recorded by this clerk should also be lost. Otherwise, there is no reason to use his records, which can be regarded as diaries, as historical documents. And this also shows how serious the crisis the Shining Civilization has encountered. He said he was the clerk of the Border Star Territory, right? Before Chen Ming could respond, the minister continued directly. There are problems in the core areas, so it is his turn to do this. But I have never seen a war in history where a foreign invasion started from the core. What Shining Civilization encountered should not be an external enemy, but an internal rebellion. Right? Chen Ming simply responded and motioned for the minister to continue reading. On July 23rd, Shining Year 7178, I still don't have much information, but from the conversations between the team leader and the minister in the unit, it seems that the situation on the front line is really bad to the extreme. More than 50% of the entire Shining Star territory has been occupied by the enemy. They were still discussing the enemy-occupied area, but I was discovered and driven away before I could finish listening. The higher-ups seem to be hiding a lot of things from the lower levels like us. I still can't even determine how many enemies there are on the front lines. Definitely no less. The time of this blog is more than 30 days apart from the previous one. In fact, there are some records in the intervening period, but they are all daily nonsense, and they are all complaints. Complain about God, complain about superiors, complain about the mechanical clan, complain about why you took on this job. However, there seems to be no complaints about his own life between the lines. The logs of these complaints were half-hidden records in Shining Civilization's documents, so Chen Ming directly skipped them and turned directly to the record of the clerk talking about war-related matters. In 3 years, half of the Shining Civilization was occupied. The scale of this rebellion is quite big. The psychic minister said something and continued reading. On February 2nd, Shining Year 7179, we were attacked. I originally thought the war was still far away from me, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. The team leader is dead. Death is ugly. He dragged half of his body and asked us to evacuate underground. The minister was crippled and was dragged underground by me and another clerk. He barely managed to recover half of his life. Everyone else seems to be dead. After all, this building collapsed, so the 4 of us were lucky enough to be outside and not buried directly. You can also take the opportunity to run away. There is only one question in my mind at this time. Where is the queen? The clerk must have been in the safe rear at the beginning. Although he may have changed his location, he must have been near the border. It has only been more than 4 months since it has affected him. The enemies of Shining Civilization are progressing a little too fast. Speaking of which, where is the queen of Shining Civilization? Chen Ming still didn't answer the question, but just said, "You will know after reading it." On April 44, Shining Year 7179, I recovered from my injuries. Only when I started taking up this job did I realize how troublesome this job was. What I was doing was just scrap work, but the team leader died. I became the team leader. I was exposed to a lot of information that I had no access to before, and I also had to take on a lot of responsibilities that I didn't need to bear before. In the first few days when I first became a team leader, I saw the information that I couldn't see before, which really made me have the nightmare of my life. I'm really tired, but there's nothing I can do about it. The enemy penetrates into every aspect of us, making this war difficult to handle from the root. And their methods are extremely cruel. I really can't understand why they are like this. Who can I ask? You can only forget these things if you immerse yourself completely in your work. The Minister of Psychics already had suspicions at this time, but he was not sure yet. On June 33, shining year 7179, the minister died. As a sequelae of the last time, a new minister came, and I took the position of deputy minister. I was promoted so quickly during the war, but I couldn't be happier at all. Not only because I will die, but also because of the news about the queen. The queen said she was going into hibernation and would no longer be able to take care of the empire. At this time, the queen. I really want to say something, but I dare not. Hibernation? Only the strongest psyker of the shining civilization can be the ruler, right? Is one of the strongest psykers dormant at this time? Mailing yourself by fighting their enemies? Chen Ming spread his hands and said, as far as I know, the queen of shining civilization never seems to appear on the battlefield, and no one knows the reason for her dormancy. What? On January 1st, shining year 7180, in the new year, the queen was confirmed to have disappeared, but a successor to the queen emerged, and the remaining resistance forces were under his leadership. He said he found a powerful means to deal with this war. I am not a psychic. I don't know if what he said is true or false. I hope it is true. In this way, at least our historical records are not simply about being beaten unilaterally, but we can at least resist. The minister quickly skipped this record and looked at the next paragraph. January 3, shining year 7180. The queen's successor is really capable. He really succeeded in containing the enemy's attack. A large amount of flesh and blood tissue appeared out of thin air on each enemy's body. Although it was disgusting, it was effective. As a result, the main weapon we are currently using is not easy to use on the battlefield, and I don't know if the successor can handle it alone. Others seem to have known about this power for a long time. They are not surprised, they are worried. Is this the Scarlet Power? Yes, only Scarlet's power can achieve such an effect. But I heard that the Shining Civilization is very resistant to the Scarlet Power. Who did you listen to? Brainwashing psychers. The minister seemed to have expected something when he heard this. On February 12th, shining year 7180, the situation is improving. On April 9th, shining year 7180, the successor never came back in the process of gaining stronger power. The base area that had been recaptured was once again captured by the machine race. The machine race gave up that place soon after, but none of the troops we sent out to reoccupy that place came back alive. There was no response from the teams before and after. Later I heard that the situation over there was only a blood-red color when scanned from a long distance. No one paid attention to it after that, and no one wanted to know what happened there. The Minister of Psychiatry's expression became more solemn, and he said, "Dimensional infection." Chen Ming knew more than the minister, and could probably guess what happened in the past. As the successor of the queen, the strongest psychic in the Shining Civilization at that time should be besides the queen, and of course he could not watch the Shining Civilization fall. He could only choose to use the most extreme means to save Shining. Rely on Scarlet, Master Scarlet. But the power of Scarlet is extremely dangerous. Even Chen Ming almost died in it several times. This psychic was either killed by Scarlet or encountered the Scarlet creature belonging to him. Anyway, he died in the Scarlet dimension. The remaining Scarlet is naturally unmanaged, and of course it will expand naturally. The final outcome, who knows what it will become? At least the normal universe has not been destroyed yet, which means that those Scarlets have been dealt with after all. June 11, 7180, Shining Year. I am now more than just the minister of the Ministry of History and Culture. The entire Ministry of Culture should now be called the Ministry of Civilization. The people in the Ministry of Civilization have been replaced in batches, and they have fled with the main force again and again. I don't know how many people have died. Now I am the one with the longest seniority here. But it doesn't matter. The product we designed has sent us into the abyss. The Empress and the imperial system have become a thing of the past. Civilization has completely collapsed. We must find another way out. Sure enough, it's the mechanical race. Chen Ming confirmed. The mechanical race of the Shining Civilization is very developed. There are mechanical races in almost all the territories of the Shining Civilization, scattered in different places. The rebellion will happen suddenly, and of course the final scale will be very large. The mechanical race sent their creator to hell. If Yue Wei had not rebelled, but endured, we might have the same ending. Remember what I said just now, that the Scarlet Power prevented the Shining from using weapons? Their biological weapons are actually the Thorn Zerg. Is there such a thing? There is such a thing. On June 13th, 7180 of the Shining Era, the entire team was semi-paralyzed for a few days. I finally had 2 days of free time to check historical documents. A wormhole leading to a distant star field. The war started halfway through the development and preparation. There might be a chance there. I have reported this news to those responsible for the war, and there should be a reply tomorrow. June 14, 7180 Shining Year. The report I submitted made many people regain their fighting spirit, and they all checked the history of their respective departments. Although our military strength is almost enough, we also discovered a Guardian plan in the early stage of the war. Although it has not been implemented, perhaps we can try it. Leviathan. Yes. July 29, 7180 Shining Year. Many people sacrificed, but it was worth it. We have the power to temporarily compete with the enemy. We summoned the fleet to evacuate the last piece of homeland, passed through the wormhole, and came to the new world. The population counted is only a few billion, from trillions to more than a billion. February 45, 7181 Shining Year. The enemy also discovered the wormhole, as expected, but we no longer have the power to fight them. The Guardian has suffered heavy losses during our evacuation. Someone proposed an idea, maybe we can give it a try. On June 6, 7181 in the Shining Year, the experiment of converting stars into black holes and inducing the emergence of black hole creatures was successful. This is good news. We don't have to continue to protect the wormhole with our lives. But there is also bad news. There is a problem with our reproductive ability. It is not a sequelae of war, but a special genetic virus. None of the remaining billions of people has not been infected with this virus. The Queen's successor has warned us before that we must never use cloning technology to expand the population. We have worked so hard for so long. Is it going to end here? After the end of this log, there was no new log for a long time. Until 5 years later. On January 1st, 7186 in the Shining Year, we made a great decision. We decided to record all people's consciousness and upload it to the internet, and at the same time provide all citizens with a nanomechanized body. We went through a long discussion and technical research before finally deciding to do this. This is the most efficient way for us to continue to exist. The minister's expression suddenly changed, and he asked, "Did you tell me before that the city planet was originally full of broken nanorobots that looked like sand?" "Yes." "Then, just as you thought. Some of those yellow sand-like nanorobots are the nanorobots that make up the city planet. But there may also be countless bodies of people from the Shining Civilization. It was quite scary when I first knew about it, but it's nothing. I can't repair my psychic power. Those people from the Shining Civilization are completely dead. At most, I just recycled some materials." Well, March 13, 7187 Shining Year. After 553 days, everyone's consciousness has been successfully uploaded, and we have completely entered the era of nanotechnology. Our ideal city has also begun construction. We want to build a planet that contains everything shining. Its official scientific name is Urban Planet, but we all like to call it Ideal City. It is the spark of hope for Shining Civilization to revive. It is not the Shining Civilization of the Queen, but the Shining Civilization of our survivors. In between, there is another long blank. This time it is not because the clerk is being chased around by the mechanical race, but because he is one of the current top leaders of Shining Civilization and really has no free space to record these. May 23, 7196 Shining Year. Integrate the world into one city and cast one city for the world. After 9 years, the construction of the ideal city was completed. But just after this record of the completion of the construction of the ideal city, the log suddenly stopped. Only the last sentence was recorded on it. Traitor. The log ends here, but the history of the Shining Civilization does not end here. It is obvious that the situation is clear. The survivors are the betrayers of the survivors of the Shining Civilization. The survivors are the means left by the Queen. The survivors are not completely wiped out. Some of them still escaped from the ideal city and went to the place where Chen Ming discovered the Shining Cultural Memorial Hall and built that building. This is the past of the Shining Civilization. History is rediscovered today. The Shining Civilization can be said to have been destroyed by the double disasters of the Scarlet Invasion and the Mechanical Rebellion. Scarlet, Chen Ming can suppress it now. Although there is no way to deal with it completely, as long as he is alive and exists in the Empire for one day, Scarlet will not invade the Empire. But the Mechanical Clan, that is indeed a huge trouble. Moreover, the Empire has to face another survivor who can now be called a natural disaster. Although Chen Ming said it very arrogantly before, he knew that the Queen's power was indeed extremely powerful. He must prepare countermeasures. In the entire Empire, I am afraid that only he can confront the Queen. After letting the minister digest it for a while, Chen Ming suggested, let's go back first. Although the space station was taken away by them, if he is here, it is equivalent to leaving the space station behind. We can find someone to record the necessary information later. The minister asked in confusion, who? Many nanorobots gathered around Chen Ming, forming a human-shaped structure. Nano, the one that the survivor talked to us. But this nano is only half, and the other half of the nano is still with the survivor. But they don't know what I did yet. They will definitely keep hiding. The minister nodded. It seems that the matter of the survivor can come to an end. A few hours later, Gaia Planet, Gaia Orbital Space Station. A young man was sitting on the sofa in Tianzhan's office, shivering anxiously, looking outside the office from time to time, with an extremely nervous expression. At this moment, Lao Yao, who was arranged by Chen Ming to pay more attention to Tianzhan's physical condition, ran in and asked Tianzhan behind the desk, Old Tian, don't you want to go and take a look? He pointed outside and saw a group of people gathered at the edge of the space station, observing the urban planet that appeared near the orbit of Gaia through the porthole of the space station. Tianzhan shook his head and said, I've seen it, it's quite shocking. Yeah, a ball suddenly appeared next to it for a few hours. Who wouldn't be confused? And there's more than just the ball, there are also the bodies of the Leviathans. Director Wang next door opened a bet, betting that the director killed a few Leviathans in a place we can't see, and when the space station of those Leviathans will be built. Are you interested? Tianzhan shook his head again and said, No, I have to pick up my daughter from school later. Oh, just playing around. I saw that he has set up more than 100 Leviathans over there, so I threw $5 in to play around. The young man next to him suddenly asked boldly, That? Team leader Tian, aren't you afraid? There's nothing to be afraid of. The sky curtain outside has been removed, which means that the matter is over. Old Yao patted his shoulder and said, Yes, yes, young people are not very brave. They need to go out more and see more. Tianzhan suddenly raised his hand to signal Old Yao to count the sound and then answered the phone. The call came from his men who were sent out to search for plants in other galaxies. Team leader Tian, help. Our spaceship was shot down and the space station was bombed. Only the shelter is safe, but it won't be safe for long. What's going on? It's the Mechanic Clan. Chen Ming had just returned to the Gaia galaxy from the Empire with the Minister of Psychic Energy and a group of people he had just recruited who were going to the urban planet to confirm what technology was left behind. I received a communication from Yu Tianxiang saying that something happened to the expatriate personnel and the situation seemed serious, and I couldn't explain clearly on the phone. So he changed his original plan and directly drove the spacecraft to land on the Gaia space station with people. Leave the job of arranging accommodation to Afterglow Corps. Anyway, it doesn't matter where you live. The space station in the orbit of the Gaia planet next to the urban planet is more convenient. Then he ran to Tianzhang's office with the minister. As soon as he opened the door, Chen Ming asked Tianxiang, "What's the specific situation?" Tianxian decisively projected a star map in front of him, marked a point on it, and said, "I sent a team to this place to find new plants before. Just now, they said they were attacked by a mechanical tribe." The Minister of Psychic Energy was very concerned about this kind of thing and asked, "Mechanical tribe? Are they being attacked by the mechanical tribe on the border colonial planet?" "Yes," he said. "It was a large-scale mechanical attack. It seems that the patrol fleet and the space station in orbit have been destroyed, but the specific situation cannot be determined." "Can I still get in touch?" "No. I just kept asking him not to hang up the phone, but the call was still disconnected. Maybe the superlight communication base station was demolished, or—" Chen Ming and the minister looked at each other and seemed to have guessed a possibility. That is, the first wave of invasion and attacks by the mechanical tribe after the test has begun. Things on the front line are not reported through the government and military systems so quickly, so it is indeed possible for people at the bottom to know what is happening earlier than those at the top. The Minister of Psychics looked a little depressed and said, "Did the early warning system have no effect at all? It was a waste of so many resources." Chen Ming was not very interested in this thing from the beginning, so he was not surprised that this situation occurred. These things are much less effective at critical times, and they are also of the mechanical type. Their technology should not be too difficult to avoid early warnings. It's better to go over and take a look. The military forces of Gaia and Xiwan are both under the direct control of Chen Ming, and the strongest combat power is himself. If something happens to one of his own, he can't sit in the office and leave the task to others or Yuhui. The Minister of Psychic Energy said immediately, "I'll go too." It would be okay if Chen Ming's men only encountered some scattered mechanical tribes. But if it was really the first round of invasion by the mechanical tribe, then he had to figure out the situation thoroughly. If you follow Chen Ming there, you will definitely learn the truth earlier than when the news is reported layer by layer. Chen Ming acquiesced to the Minister of Psychic Energy and asked Tianxian again, "Did they bring special equipment when they went on a mission?" "Everyone brought it." "Okay." Chen Ming reached out and put his hand on the minister's shoulder. Their bodies were wrapped in metallic liquid, and they disappeared into the space station in the blink of an eye. At the same time, in the only colonial city on a backward colonial planet in a certain edge star field of the Empire, the impact and smoke of the explosion, the roar and fire of weapons almost covered the entire city. A large number of mechanical units were dropped from orbit to the planet's surface, constantly destroying industrial facilities on the planet's surface, and after the industrial facilities were destroyed, they targeted cities and civilians. The ruins of buildings and broken limbs have almost become the main tone of the city. And deep underground in the city, cries, sighs, and wails of pain filled the air raid shelter, a small shelter that could accommodate thousands of people. These people who came here to take refuge at the earliest stage of the mechanical tribe's attack were listening to the movements outside with great concern. At this time, the planet's communication signal has been completely disconnected. With no idea of what is happening outside, panic is spreading among everyone. In the face of such a natural disaster, they can do nothing. Among them, there was a field team sent by Tianzhang. Compared to other locals, their panic was less severe. But facing the danger above their heads, they couldn't completely rest assured either. Just when they were at their wits' end, a device on the leader of the field team suddenly seemed to have received some signal, and a voice came out, "Go to the corner." Although the equipment still had no signal, the team leader and nearby team members still felt a sense of relief at this moment. Immediately following the instructions, they ran to the corner of the underground air raid shelter, and the team gathered around them, completely blocking their surroundings. Immediately afterwards, a large amount of metallic liquid overflowed from the equipment in the team leader's hand, forming two liquid masses the size of one person in the middle of several people. Chen Ming and the Minister of Psychic Energy walked out of the metal group. "Director Chen." Chen Ming put his index finger in front of his lips to signal the others to be quiet, so as not to attract unnecessary attention. He didn't want others to see him coming out of the metallic liquid and make others think that he was the only life-saving straw. Although he didn't mind rescuing people in times of crisis, he wasn't happy to do something that put pressure directly on his head. How's the situation? After Chen Ming asked the same question as he asked Tianzhan before, the team leader immediately took out his terminal and handed it to Chen Ming, saying, "This is the video we just saved. Please take a look." The content of the video is very simple. The team leader led the team to conduct an investigation in the wilderness, collecting local plants as alternatives to Gaia plants. The development level of this kind of border star field planet is not high, and even now, some unrecorded plants can occasionally be found. Even if no suitable plants are found to replace Gaia plants, finding some new unrecorded plant species can also make some achievements. The previous content was skipped by Chen Ming at a faster speed. The time in the video soon came to night. The team members have been in the wild for several days and are preparing to return to the only colony city on the entire planet to rest, replenish supplies, and prepare for the next outing. However, at this moment, a team member suddenly pointed his hand to the sky. Then the team members raised their heads together and saw the fire blooming in the space in the dark night. The blazing flames were extremely obvious in the sky. The team that Chen Ming came out of must have contact with the local government. So the team leader wanted to confirm the situation with the government as soon as possible. However, the team leader could not contact the local government, and the government's phone had been blown up. Just as the team members were considering whether to return to the city, they saw a burning fireball suddenly appear in the orbit of the planet under their feet, falling from space to the ground. Judging from the internal structure illuminated by the fireball, it was the orbital space station that the team members often went to. The team leader immediately took the team members to hide in the nearest suburban underground shelter. Contacted Tianzhan. Then, it was what Chen Ming knew. Chen Ming roughly understood the process and asked, "You should have only seen the patrol fleet and the enemy fighting, and then the space station was destroyed? How do you know it was the mechanical race?" A team member took the initiative to say at this time, "Director Chen, I just happened to see the light effect of the mechanical race's ridge cannon in space, so I guessed it was the mechanical race." Chen Ming nodded slightly. The structure of the mechanical race's ridge cannon is indeed quite special and conspicuous, and the energy light pollution emitted when it is activated is also quite characteristic. People who have learned about it can infer that it is the mechanical race when they see the traces of the ridge cannon activated in space on the surface. And he also noticed that many people in the shelter were talking about things outside, and obviously many people also saw the traces of the mechanical race. Basically, it can be confirmed that it is the mechanical race. The psychic minister on the side was listening to what Chen Ming and the team members were talking about, and was also observing the situation in the shelter. He suddenly said, "It seems that there are only 3,000 or 4,000 people here. I don't know what the situation is in other places. Can the shelter defend against the mechanical race?" "It can't be defended." Chen Ming gave a direct answer. While communicating with the team members, he had already released the metal liquid through the wall of the shelter. He saw the invasion of the mechanical race and the tragic situation in the city, but he couldn't see the survivors. There is no living person left on the surface of the entire colony and the shelters in the city. Chen Ming used the metal liquid to find the city design drawings in the office of the Urban Planning Center of the government building, and then dispersed the metal liquid to check them one by one. Several shelters near the edge of the city have not had any problems so far, but the shelters inside the city have all been breached by the mechanical race. In the shelters, no matter men, women, young or old, or babies in swaddling clothes. As long as they are human, they are all killed by the mechanical race. There is not even a complete body in those shelters. Even just watching, Chen Ming felt a surge of anger. Any normal person would not be able to have no fluctuations in his heart when seeing such a miserable state of his fellow human beings. The entire planet originally had a population of at least 8 million people, according to Chen Ming's rough statistics now. There are still 60,000 left in total, all scattered in those shelters on the edge of the city. The Minister of Psychic Energy frowned and confirmed, "Only 60,000 left? Yes, there may be some in the wilderness, but it will definitely not exceed 65,000. If we don't care, this number will continue to decrease." Well, Chen Ming suddenly paused. Speaking of which, another mechanical tribe found a shelter. There are almost 9,000 people in that shelter. Can they be rescued? They have been rescued, but saving these few people will not cure the root cause. The Minister of Psychic Energy proposed an idea and said, "We have to confirm how many mechanical tribes there are and what the scale of this attack is. It will definitely not be small." Chen Ming said, "I just got a spaceship to repair the broken communication base station and then contacted other nearby star systems. What's the result? In the entire star field, no place replied to my message. Maybe their respective communication systems have exploded. Well, alas." Chen Ming's words made the Minister of Psychic Energy and the team members silent. Although some wanted to find excuses to fill in, everyone knew what the most likely scenario was. The Minister of Psychic Power sighed. The real mechanical war is about to begin. It's coming so fast that we haven't even had time to completely digest and absorb the resources in the mechanical star field. We haven't even had time to systematize the shining civilization technology we just got. Chen Ming didn't hesitate for a moment. He simply said to the Minister of Psychic Power, "Go recruit people." Who to recruit? Everyone is welcome. I'll give you a rough list of the technologies kept by the survivors. We'll recruit people in every profession and divide these technologies as quickly as possible. Technology that can be used, all the techniques are used to produce the finished product as quickly as possible, and I will verify the effect and optimize the finished product. Hasn't the Empire been preparing? It's time to make it move. Also, what about the nearby legions? The Minister of Psionics thought for a while and replied, "The 19th Legion and the 20th Legion, the two newest legions of the Empire, their military strength may not be able to withstand the mechanical race." Chen Ming frowned slightly and said, "I remember that it was a long time ago that I shared the technology of the earliest shining civilization spaceship." Chen Ming remembered that although the type of ships in the Empire has not changed much so far, there has been progress in ship design. After all, the update and iteration of stable ship technology that has been confirmed in kind is different from the expansion and application of new technologies, and the difficulty is not that great. In theory, the gap between the Empire's ship technology and the mechanical race warships is not that big, at least not as big as the gap of superbody. The Minister of Psychic Power explained, "They were just formed not long ago, so they were assigned to this place. They have never fought a high-intensity war. This is all bullshit." Chen Ming cursed and then said, "Even if they can't win, they have to fight. Even if they can't bear it, they have to bear it. They are soldiers. I don't think I should say this, right? Yes, I think too much. I have been with you for a long time and always want to make people as safe as possible. I don't have the ability to protect people like you. I don't have the ability to protect the entire empire." Chen Ming's words made the Minister of Psychic Power sigh again. He asked, "What about us? Should we run away with people? Or should we find a way to kill the mechanical tribe here?" "You can't run away." Chen Ming immediately gave his judgment. "It seems that the mechanical tribe has smashed the entire star field, and all military forces have been completely destroyed. Although there are more than 100 star systems in this marginal star field with people, the total population is only about 1 billion. Most of them are on various types of mineral planets. It is too difficult to take them all away. They are too scattered. We must kill all the mechanical tribes before we can protect people." Chen Ming clenched his fist and tapped his chest lightly and said, "I will deal with them. But the mechanical tribe will be on guard against your abilities, and the top psychics should be used as trump cards. You can't just do it casually." Chen Ming interrupted the minister directly and said, "I have my own ideas." Hashtag 442 Chapter 428 Neutron. Chen Ming used psychic energy to come to the outside of the shelter. At this time, there are still a large number of mechanical tribes on the surface of the planet, searching for the remaining humans on the planet or searching for technological products belonging to humans. There are still engineering machinery tribe units using the building materials in the city and the materials transported by orbital airdrops to build production buildings belonging to the mechanical tribe on the ruins of the city. Dismantle everything belonging to humans and create new power for the mechanical tribe. Outside the planet, The mechanical tribe's fleet is reorganizing after the battle. There are at least thousands of spacecraft of different levels, including a mothership and hundreds of cruisers. This is why the local patrol fleet was almost completely destroyed without any resistance. Under such firepower, even the orbital space station did not have much chance to struggle and was destroyed by the mechanical tribe in an instant. At this time, the mechanical tribe still has a lot of transport ships constantly heading to the ground from the mothership above the planet's orbit. The mechanical tribe units that are redundant for ground combat power are reloaded and taken away, and it seems that they are going to be used at their next destination. However, there are still enough mechanical tribe ground units left on the planet to control the planet. The mechanical race is serious this time. Their purpose is not just destruction and looting, but a real invasion war. Once they have a base on the border of the Empire, and let the remaining mechanical forces behind them continue to follow, the Empire's counterattack will be very difficult. The mechanical race must not be allowed to take root on the border of the Empire. Chen Ming looked at the sky, and the psychic wave swept out. Endless metal liquid poured out from the void under the psychic wave, directly wrapping the entire planet and covering all places near the planet's orbit. It also swallowed up those mechanical race spaceships above the orbit. With Chen Ming's current ability, the mechanical race has no power to resist. However, Chen Ming did not directly mix the afterglow core into the metal liquid of the sky to control the spaceships of the mechanical race. He did not intend to expose his way of controlling the enemy without personal contact so early. Just using the metal sky is already the most efficient means he has to deal with the mechanical race, and no additional power is needed. But at this time, an unexpected situation still happened. At the same time, when Chen Ming's metal sky curtain surrounded the planet, some mechanical spacecraft flying away from or approaching the planet touched the metal sky curtain and were restricted by the metal liquid. A large number of mechanical warships outside the planet directly chose to self-destruct and turn themselves into balls of fire in the universe by destroying their own engines, ammunition depots, and fuel depots. The motherships in the planet's orbit, which were also wrapped in metal liquid, chose to directly bombard the surface of the planet with ridge cannons. Several red energy beams constantly swept through the ruins of the colony city on the planet, regardless of the possibility that there might be their kind among them. The city was already only ruins, and under the bombardment, there was almost nothing valuable left. And what was even more surprising, those mechanical units in the surface ruins that were not directly destroyed by the ridge cannon bombardment also gave due cooperation. Those engineering mechanical units that were still manufacturing and installing various mechanical production equipment immediately dismantled or blew up the built facilities. And the remaining mechanical units without production capacity uniformly chose to self-destruct without any hesitation. All mechanical races have their own nanorobots, and they use the antimatter energy supply of nanorobots to create annihilation and self-destruction, and they won't even leave too much debris. What the mechanical race does is to go for complete destruction. Chen Ming can understand this situation. The mechanical race has indeed been on guard against him, and has also thought of the most appropriate way to deal with him. That is self-destruction. And before self-destruction, or before being controlled by Chen Ming, they will cause the most serious damage to humans and try to destroy more of everything belonging to the Empire. The nature of the mechanical race itself determines that they have absolutely no power to resist when facing Chen Ming. Since they can't resist, whoever is in this position knows what to do. Moreover, the target of the mechanical race should never be Chen Ming, but the Empire. Destroy the foundation of the Empire and bring a painful blow to the Empire. This is what they want to do. Chen Ming's energy and ability are limited after all. He can protect a galaxy and a star field, but he can never protect an empire. If Chen Ming comes, he will self-destruct and exchange war damage with the Empire. If Chen Ming doesn't come, then they will use their due strength. Doing so will really disgust Chen Ming. It makes Chen Ming have no place to use his strength, like a punch on cotton. But what they do at this time cannot change Chen Ming's approach. After the metal sky curtain completely covered the planet, it fell to the surface of the planet like the sky was falling. There were some mechanical spacecrafts approaching the surface of the planet. When they confirmed that their speed could not reach the surface and destroy some human buildings before the sky curtain caught up, they chose to self-destruct directly in space. The mothership that attacked the planet continued to land rapidly before the sky curtain fell, and the firepower of the entire ship was constantly output to the city on the ground. Just hope to use up all the stocks before being caught up by Chen Ming's metal sky. Of course, this is impossible. But the mothership obviously did not expect it to use up all the energy stocks. Because it did not slow down at all when approaching the surface, it crashed into the center of the. Before the mothership crashed, it opened its engine power to the maximum and also detonated its own ammunition depot and energy battery. The chain reaction caused by this series of self-explosions made the energy explosion power of the main battleship reach its peak. Even in space, you can see the mushroom cloud that almost covered the entire city. And at the moment when the mothership exploded, in those shelters where there were still survivors on the edge of the city, a large amount of metal liquid appeared out of thin air and covered the edges of the shelter walls. Just when the survivors in the shelters were extremely panicked because of the sudden unknown situation. The next moment, the explosion of the mothership's self-destruction spread all the way to the shelters along the strata. This violent impact was accompanied by violent shocks and crustal vibrations caused by the impact. The entire shelter was shaking like a small boat in a storm. The impact and earthquake also destroyed the shelter's power system. The arrival of darkness made the shelter scream constantly, and an accident was about to happen. The light returned to the shelter again, and those metal liquids disappeared after a short period of darkness, as if they had never appeared. This was of course done by Chen Ming. If he didn't do this, all ordinary people would die under the impact of the mothership's self-destruction. This impact that could destroy the entire city was not something the shelter's structure could withstand. He had to go back to help. Otherwise, the survivors of the entire planet would completely cease to exist. The psychic minister who was also in the shelter also saw the metal liquids protecting the shelter, and he also felt the terrifying impact. He couldn't sit still anymore. While everyone was stunned by the impact of the metal liquid that had just arrived, he came to a door leading to the outside world of the shelter and went directly outside the shelter. As soon as he walked out of the shelter to the outside, he found that the outside was plunged into darkness. Thick smoke and dust had covered the entire city. He used psychic waves to disperse the smoke and dust, but the darkness did not ease at all. Previously, you could see the starry sky full of stars, but now you can only see some scattered light spots distributed on it. And these light spots are still decreasing rapidly, as if they are being extinguished by something. The minister took a closer look and seemed to see the sky falling. His heart tightened, but he immediately relaxed again, because he knew that it was Chen Ming's power. The sky fell. This metal liquid, which should be heavier than the mothership and more destructive, just fell like rain and seeped into the ground. It did not cause damage to anything belonging to humans, but only completely engulfed everything belonging to the mechanical race on the planet. The mechanical race of the entire planet completely disappeared in just a few minutes. Chen Ming quickly returned to the minister who was outside the shelter. The minister immediately stepped forward to ask Chen Ming, "What's going on?" "It's all solved, but to be honest, I feel a little disgusted." "What's wrong? Can you see what they are doing?" The minister glanced at the surrounding buildings that seemed to have been hit by a nuclear bomb, and the deep pit in the center of the city that was relit under the starlight. He thought about the possible reasons for this situation and asked, "Did the mechanical race self-destruct?" "Yes." The mechanical race that Chen Ming really restricted was only the ones that he touched the moment the sky curtain just opened. Almost all other mechanical races self-destructed, causing the entire colonial city to completely lose its value of existence. And after the mechanical races self-destructed, Chen Ming obtained very few materials from their corpses, almost all of which were annihilated by the antimatter in their nanorobots. Even if all the mechanical races were eliminated, everything that should have happened had already happened. This feeling made Chen Ming very uncomfortable. The psychic minister comforted Chen Ming and said, "Think positively. As long as you pass by the mechanical tribe, they will solve themselves. You don't need to spend much effort, right?" And the mechanical tribe is a group. The group has the highest command. They must have a command center or something like that. They can't self-destruct in this command center, right? That's right. Chen Ming nodded. He was just a little disgusted by the mechanical tribe using this method that he had never used before. He will get used to it. Next time he faces the mechanical tribe, he can use a more economical way to deal with it. Although the mechanical tribe's behavior can indeed prevent his ability from being fully exerted for them, this way of doing things is also a double-edged sword. This galaxy should be safe for the time being, and it can be basically confirmed that the mechanical tribe is indeed invading. I'll send you back first. It's definitely better to notify the mechanical tribe about the war as soon as possible. They attacked and destroyed the Superlight communication base station immediately. They must want to occupy more star fields before the information is sent. As long as the information is released, their first step will be half ruined. And, no, you must know more about this than me, so I won't waste my words. The Minister of Psychic Energy was still nodding at this time. He stopped after hearing Chen Ming's words and said, "Don't worry, I will not miss anything that should be done. What are your plans? As you said, the mechanical race must have a control center. Find it and solve it. That's what I'm going to do." Chen Ming raised his head. There was a half-red and half-white influence above his head that cut through the night sky and came here. That was the super body that had been infected by the Scarlet Power for a long time and could not be dispersed. After greeting the minister and sending the minister back to the capital of the empire, Chen Ming boarded the super body and, under the effect of time acceleration psychic energy, headed to the capital of the marginal star field where he was at the fastest speed. That was the most likely location for the main fleet of the mechanical race, and it was also the most likely location for the central core of the mechanical race to occupy later. The behavior of the mechanical race has already shown their purpose. Going here will not be wrong. The super body helped Chen Ming reach the capital star system of the star field almost instantly. This is information with 6 planets. Although it is in the Edge star system, the natural resources in the star system are still rich. However, the problem is that Chen Ming did not find any traces of mechanical race warships here. He only found a large number of traces of energy aggregation that had not yet dissipated above the capital planet of the capital star system. The super body immediately approached. As soon as he approached, Chen Ming found that there were a large number of extremely active neutrons in these traces of energy aggregation. Even if he was just close to Chen Ming, he could feel that these neutrons were bombarding the cells in his body, constantly destroying the vitality of his body. And around this energy source, there is a place with a higher neutron density. It is the capital planet of the star field below Chen Ming. An extremely bad picture suddenly appeared in Chen Ming's mind. Without thinking too much, he directly controlled the super body to land on the surface of the planet. At the same time, biological armor appeared on the surface of his body to protect him, to prevent the extremely dense neutron environment from causing further damage to his body. The super body quickly approached the colony on the planet and stopped above the core colony. At this time, the entire colony had no trace of life, and only death was left. Chen Ming jumped from the super body to the ground. He landed in the middle of a commercial street that should have been extremely prosperous. There were no pedestrians on the entire street, only corpses everywhere. The situation here was much worse than Chen Ming had imagined. I'm afraid the entire population of the planet has died. The cause of death was the activated neutrons scattered throughout the surrounding environment. Chen Ming looked up at the sky. It seemed that he saw a giant device belonging to the mechanical family releasing an extremely fierce neutron jet towards the ground in space. The shape of the giant device became more and more concrete in his mind. In the end, it formed a colossus-level appearance that the Imperial children were currently envisioning. Chen Ming lowered his head and walked towards the corpse closest to him. The corpse's eyes were wide open, and his expression was extremely hideous. It was obvious that he had suffered inhuman pain before death. The neutron torrent could not kill organisms instantly. All those whose genes and body tissues were shattered by neutrons would still struggle painfully for more than 10 seconds to 1 minute before death. Looking at these corpses whose bodies were in so much pain that they almost tore themselves apart before death, it was really hard for Chen Ming not to be touched. The last time he saw a similar situation was Zhuijing. Chen Ming felt anger building up in his heart. He knew about this attack method using neutrons. As early as when he learned about the design concept of the Colossus, the concept of neutron weapons called neutron annihilation had been put on the table and appeared together with the main design direction of the Colossus, the Earth-shattering star. The Earth-shattering star was designed to directly destroy the planet itself. The design purpose of neutron annihilation is to most efficiently clean up all living things on the planet, including organisms, machines, and Scarlet. Organisms will have their genes shattered by neutrons. Machinery will have its circuits pierced by neutrons. Scarlet will also be affected in a similar way. The original intention of the weapon design was very good, because the purpose of the Colossus-class weapon design itself was to clean up the planet affected by the Scarlet. Neutron weapons can not only eliminate the Scarlet and the creatures affected by the Scarlet, but also preserve the resources of the planet itself. It only takes about 10 years to wait for the activated neutrons on the planet to deactivate, or it takes 2 or 3 years to actively clean up the activated neutrons. However, when the Scarlet infection is at its worst, everything will be transformed into Scarlet, and the probability of the planet being preserved intact is not high. In addition, the Empire is not short of habitable planet resources. What it lacks is those resources that are concentrated and worth developing, and it is not short of a planet infected by Scarlet. The design difficulty of the Earth-shattering star is obviously simpler than the neutron extermination, and the intuitive effect is more obvious. The Earth-shattering star is obviously more useful for dealing with severely infected Scarlet planets. When facing some enemies who are not afraid of neutrons, such as the Leviathan before, the overall performance is obviously better. Moreover, although the Scarlet creatures have biological characteristics, it cannot be guaranteed that the neutron jet will have a complete effect on them, especially when the Scarlet infects an entire planet. The entire planet has become the incarnation of Scarlet, and the neutron torrent may not be able to solve it. Moreover, the Empire's scientific research resources are limited. The Empire now has more than just the Colossus-class weapon, which is an important and huge project. In any case, the entire project team can only study the technology of one Colossus-class weapon before the Colossus is really built. Therefore, the design of neutron annihilation was not put on the research. The research direction of the Empire remained in the direction of the Earth-shattering star, specifically for Scarlet. The mechanical race also had Colossus-class weapons, and the type of Colossus-class weapons used was neutron annihilation. This was not surprising to Chen Ming, because the basic concept of Colossus-class weapons was learned from the Shining Civilization and redesigned after the Empire was unified. Understanding is understanding. Chen Ming could not accept such weapons being used on his own people. He had always been clamoring to break away from the Empire and be self-sufficient, but he had never disagreed with his human identity. And as he got closer and closer to the construction of colonies, he also knew that his original idea of breaking away from the Empire and being self-sufficient was difficult to achieve. And the Empire has been changing its attitude towards him and giving compensation in various aspects. Almost all the places where Chen Ming needed, the Empire has been actively paying. Of course, the Empire could see that Chen Ming had been stealing talents from the Empire when he built the colony. It was obvious that they could just send some people who could record data and take the data away for research, but they still sent top talents from all aspects to him continuously. This was the tacit understanding between Chen Ming and the Empire. It made the disgust in his heart decrease. It can be said that the Empire was afraid after knowing Chen Ming's ability and took the initiative to admit defeat. That was enough. Chen Ming never looked at other people's ideas, but their behavior. He identified himself as a human being and a member of the Empire. Then he couldn't just watch these things happen and remain indifferent. Chen Ming disappeared from the surface in an instant. He didn't have time to collect these corpses. The best way to appease those dead souls was to completely destroy the mechanical race. He returned to the super body and searched for traces of the Colossus and its fleet in space. The scale of the Colossus is no different from that of an ordinary space station. The movement of such a huge object, whether it relies on hyperspace channels or jumps, will inevitably leave enough traces. Chen Ming didn't even need to look carefully. and he had already found an area of almost continuous jump fluctuations in the area with the highest neutron density above the planet. He directly read and analyzed the data of the jump fluctuations and determined the coordinates of the Colossus jump at the fastest speed. After a slight calculation of the time required to use the jump engine and the time stream core, the time stream core of the superbody was fully activated, and under the effect of Chen Ming's psychic power, it was instantly overloaded, accelerating the entire spacecraft to the extreme and heading in the direction of the jump. In just a moment, the superbody arrived at the edge of the target galaxy. The image of the galaxy has appeared on the sensor. Just a glance, Chen Ming did not find the Colossus and the large-scale fleet that jumped here, as well as any traces of the suspected mechanical family's central core. There is only a mechanical family fleet here that is about the same size as the fleet he solved in the previous galaxy. The fleet was divided into several smaller fleets, stationed in the orbits of several planets in this galaxy. Chen Ming has the information about this galaxy on hand. Because some time ago, people controlled by brainwashed psychics appeared in this galaxy. And there are several industrial colonies in the galaxy. The reason why the mechanical race did not choose to stay in the capital galaxy, but chose to stay here, is likely related to these industrial colonies. The Colossus will not disappear out of thin air. It must have jumped to other galaxies again. If you want to investigate the location of the Colossus, you must pass through the obstruction of these mechanical races. Chen Ming chose to strike first. He did not do it himself, but only relied on the superbody's own time flow core and space ability to be accelerated to the speed most suitable for exerting combat power and instantly passed through the orbit of every planet in the galaxy. The warships close to the superbody were cut apart, and the warships far away exploded from the inside out. Even the mothership could not escape the fate of being split in two. The last time Chen Ming's scarlet power overflowed, the superbody now became half red and half white, and it also caused the superbody to use the scarlet power while using the space power. Almost all the cross-sections of the mechanical warships that were cut by the superbody were covered with messy blood-red machinery, and they were completely infected by these blood-red machinery. Chen Ming did not deliberately prevent all this from happening. On the contrary, he continued to release more of his scarlet power. Doing so could cause the mechanical fleet to be more severely damaged, and the superbody to be more thoroughly infected by the scarlet power. At the same time, it could also allow the pent-up anger in his heart to be vented a little. Regardless of their size and battle, the mechanical race in space was cleared by Chen Ming in an instant. Then, the superbody sensor uploaded the scan results of the planet in the galaxy. Sure enough, some mechanical races had already landed on the planet. They chose to carry the activated neutrons and began to dismantle the industrial colonies of humans and transform them into their own industrial buildings. Just as Chen Ming had guessed before. After the star field occupied by the only nearby mechanical race was demolished by the Empire, those mechanical races that came from afar must have needed a base to ensure their own production capacity. A tree without roots and duckweed without water is definitely not a long-term solution. The mechanical race obviously understands this truth. Chen Ming also understands it, so he will not give the mechanical race such an opportunity. Chen Ming directly controls the superbody to land on the planet closest to him. As the superbody enters the atmosphere, the metal sky curtain is pulled up immediately, plunging the entire planet into darkness. The mechanical race, which was originally building their own colony, suddenly seemed to be stimulated by something and began to behave like the planet Chen Ming had visited before. Self-destruction. They destroyed the ruins of the colony, destroyed themselves, and destroyed the buildings they built themselves, just to prevent Chen Ming from easily obtaining these things. Chen Ming did not care about them at the moment, because his eyes have been attracted by the piles of corpses between the ruins of the colony. The colony under his feet is an industrial colony, and the population distribution is usually scattered and not too concentrated. The location where he is now is not a concentrated residential area in the colony. There is only one reason why so many corpses can appear. That is, the mechanical race gathered the corpses. The mechanical race certainly did not do this out of kindness, and they did not need to worry about the plague caused by the corpses. The reason they did this was because of the furnace-like device next to the pile of corpses. Chen Ming knew this device. It would roll the corpses into it and crush them, converting them into the most basic electrical energy. This is a biofuel generator. At this moment, Chen Ming took a casual look and saw that these devices were evenly distributed in the core area of the entire colony. All human corpses killed by neutrons would be thrown into the generator by the mechanical race for bioelectricity, and at the opening of the generator closest to Chen Ming. Just at this moment, the body of a child who was probably only in his early teens was dragged by the conveyor belt and fell into the interior of the generator. Chen Ming only felt a surge of anger for a while. He suddenly disappeared on the spot and smashed the entire power generation equipment with one punch. The shattered flesh and blood scattered all over the ground, and the half-crushed body of the child fell between the flesh and blood. Looking at what was happening in front of him, Chen Ming did not feel the anger relieved at all. The surrounding mechanical units turned a blind eye to this situation and even continued to destroy their own units, which told Chen Ming from various levels. They didn't even care about themselves. How could they care about humans? Not to mention the corpses of humans? And when the head of the child's corpse turned to his side because of the cut on the corpse and pointed the pair of lifeless eyes full of physical pain at him, Chen Ming found it even more difficult to suppress his emotions. Thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of millions of people died, which were just numbers on paper. Only when you see with your own eyes that these numbers are also living people with emotions in reality, these numbers will become the real number of deaths. Several humanoids made of metal liquid appeared around Chen Ming. These metal liquid humanoids boarded the super body together and were carried to several other planets by the super body. With the arrival of the humanoids, the metal sky curtain also completely covered all the planets in the galaxy, and once again smashed to the ground like the sky falling, destroying everything belonging to the mechanical race. This is the means he has mastered to deal with the mechanical race with the fastest efficiency. While Chen Ming was destroying the mechanical race, each mechanical race was also frantically self-destructing. They don't care about their own losses at all. They only care about causing more losses to the Empire and letting Chen Ming get less rewards when controlling them. The galaxy soon became quiet. There was no sound at all. After the colossus of the mechanical race came to this galaxy with neutron annihilation, all life in the galaxy had completely passed away. And when Chen Ming completely wiped out the mechanical race, everything became quiet. The silence of death filled the entire galaxy. Although Chen Ming had been to many galaxies without any breath of life, he felt a discomfort he had never had before from this dead galaxy. He had seen death, but he would never get used to death. Chen Ming suddenly sighed. He was suspended in the air of the planet and looked around. At a glance, the entire colony had been completely destroyed. Even if the equipment of the mechanical race had been completely dismantled, the piles of corpses still could not be properly dealt with. He still wasted time doing unnecessary things. Even if he dealt with the mechanical race and prevented the corpses from being involved in those power generation equipment, it could not change the ending that all the people in the entire galaxy died in neutron annihilation. Even if he dealt with the mechanical race more efficiently, it could not change the process of wasting time. He knew how to achieve his goal as quickly and efficiently as possible. But when he saw the corpses of those people, he couldn't help it. His power alone was still too weak after all. He could stop it for a while, and he could stop a corner. But it was absolutely impossible to stop it for a lifetime and stop the invasion of the entire mechanical race. Chen Ming quickly sorted out his emotions and warned himself not to meddle in other people's business. Some things could not change the outcome no matter how much he wanted to intervene. What he had to do was to speed up his pace and use all the means he had to completely eliminate the source that would lead to the results he didn't want to see. The scarlet color on the surface of the super body had become more and more obvious, gradually covering the original pure white. A blood-red shadow disappeared in this galaxy wiped out by the mechanical race. Go to the next one discovered by Chen Ming. The galaxy where the colossus of the mechanical race might exist. Chen Ming continued to track the traces of the jump to the next galaxy. Chen Ming continued to track the traces of the jump to the next galaxy. From the star map, The destination of the mechanical race's Colossus jump is close to the border of the Edge star field. It seems that the next move of the mechanical race is likely to continue the invasion, relying on the delay of the news caused by their destruction of the superlight communication base station, and take over multiple star fields in one go. Relying on their Colossus-level neutron killing, it can make the human control over these star fields disappear instantly. Fortunately, Chen Ming has sent the minister back, and the problem of news delay has been solved. Moreover, from the news he received later, the star field in the direction of the mechanical race's invasion actually knew the general situation when the mechanical race invaded. After all, they are two adjacent star fields with a cooperative relationship with each other, and it is very common to know about emergencies. They did report it as soon as possible, but it takes time to confirm whether the actual situation is as reported. In order not to take responsibility, the Superior Management Department they reported chose to confirm it personally, resulting in the news not being transmitted to the person who should be transmitted in the first time. Chen Ming estimated that someone's hat or even brain would be lost, but it was none of his business. He was more concerned about the local situation. At present, it seems that the local star field has begun to organize local armed forces. Although it was not possible to reinforce before the mechanical race next door was completely wiped out, at least the military force has been concentrated, and at least a certain scale of resistance can be carried out. But Chen Ming was not optimistic about their resistance. Because the standard military combat power of the Edge star field is a battleship plus about 3,000 cruiser-level combat power, tens of thousands of expellees, and more guards. And the mechanical race has already sent a battleship just to clean up a galaxy. Only when the number of battleships is similar, the lower-level fleet has room to play. Therefore, the overall military power of the mechanical race is absolutely overwhelming for the Edge star field. He has to be faster. The superbody has already achieved the fastest speed to the next galaxy. When Chen Ming arrived at the edge of the destination galaxy, he saw a large number of mechanical fleets staying here from a distance. The situation in this galaxy is also quite special. There is an industrial colony and a colony for material distribution and trade with the neighboring star field. It can be regarded as the most developed colony in the Edge star field except for the star field capital. The mechanical race is temporarily stationed here. It seems that they are waiting for the fleets from other star systems in the Edge star field to arrive before invading the next star field. Or, they may plan to station troops here for a long time, and regard the Edge star field they just destroyed as their foothold for invading the Empire, waiting for the arrival of subsequent fleets. No matter which one, this galaxy should gather almost all the living forces of the mechanical race in the first wave of attacks. And the colossus of the mechanical race that Chen Ming has been thinking about. Chen Ming can see that the colossus is now parked above the orbit of the industrial planet in the galaxy, exuding a terrifying atmosphere that seems to be able to shock everything. The design of the mechanical race's colossus is very different from that of the Empire's colossus. Their colossus has 3 giant ring structures of different sizes that are intertwined and stacked. The inner ring structure seems to be able to restrain the energy emitted by the core of the ship, while the outer ring structure seems to be able to maintain the stability of the colossus when using weapons. At one end of the central structure in the center, there is a giant barrel-shaped structure that can accommodate several battleships. That is neutron annihilation. Having found the target, Chen Ming did not intend to delay time, and the superbody immediately prepared to rush to the colossus. The most troublesome thing about the first wave of invasion of the mechanical race was the colossus. Whether it was using space cutting or air mine explosion, or even Chen Ming personally contacting and controlling it. As long as it was solved, the remaining mechanical fleet would sooner or later be destroyed by the fleet that followed the Empire. However, Chen Ming's superbody had just approached and had not yet entered the sensor range of the mechanical race's spacecraft, and it should not even be the time for the mechanical race's electronic nerves to react. The mechanical race's fleet suddenly moved. This was certainly not because of Chen Ming. The reason why the mechanical race moved was a fleet that had just jumped to the galaxy. It was not the Imperial fleet, but a Zerg fleet with an extremely obvious biomass feel. The superbody immediately drew an arc to bypass the galaxy, and then kept a good distance to check the situation in the galaxy. Chen Ming's mind was full of question marks at this time. Although he had indeed dispatched the Zerg fleet, ready to give the mechanical race a big blow and fight back their first wave of invasion in the most fierce way, he did not give the Queen an order to come immediately. And he did not feel that the Zerg fleet had any spiritual connection with him. Besides, the scale of this Zerg fleet was not large. It was mainly composed of 22 biological warships that looked like main battleships and a large number of medium and low-level ships. It couldn't be that the Zerg used as weapons by the Shining Civilization in ancient times to fight against the mechanical race came with the mechanical race. It was possible. Who knows where in the universe the mechanical race and the Zerg that remained after the destruction of the Shining Civilization fought for thousands or tens of thousands of years, and then these Zergs survived the war until now. But the weapons carried by these biological ships also look very backward. If the weapons have not evolved after fighting with the mechanical race for tens of thousands of years, let alone decades, they would have died long ago. So it should not be what Chen Ming thought. Wait. Chen Ming suddenly remembered something. Something that was ancient, but not that ancient. That was the matter of the first-generation Queen on the mining space station. The first-generation Queen has the ability to transform mechanical warships into biological warships, which is also the basis for Chen Ming to master the ability of the Zerg. At the beginning, he found the traces left by the Queen several times and wanted to look for it, but in the end the first-generation Queen disappeared in the universe, leaving only a second-generation Queen to accompany him until now. Of course, Chen Ming and the first-generation Queen did not have the same feelings as the second-generation Queen. He wanted to find the first-generation Queen purely to let his Queen eat the first-generation Queen, and maybe he could find some powerful creatures that had become extinct in the past in the genes. But as far as Chen Ming saw this scene at this moment, the first-generation Queen did not seem to have any powerful genes. Of course, there may be, but it is not shown without Chen Ming's psychic assistance. No matter what the situation is. In short, the fleet of the first-generation Queen appeared here, and it seemed that it was going to fight with the mechanical race. Chen Ming would certainly not interfere, and even wanted to see the quality of a queen. To be honest, even if the first-generation Queen was restored to a similar level as that created by the Shining Civilization, it would be extremely difficult to continue the war with the current mechanical race. Although this may not be the entire fleet of the first-generation Queen, the result should not change much. Soon, just as Chen Ming thought, the mechanical race had already reacted the moment the first-generation Queen's Zerg fleet appeared and turned back to attack the direction of the Zerg fleet. The biological carapace and Zerg muscles of the Zerg fleet were easily shattered by the weapons of the mechanical race, and the weapons they used could not even penetrate the shields of the mechanical race fleet. Even though the Zerg has an advantage in the number of battleships compared to the mechanical race, the strength of their battleships can only be said to be weaker than the mass-produced battleships designed by the Imperial Commercial Company, such as the Conqueror. The fleet of the first-generation Zerg Queen was crushed like a bug, without any room for struggle. The entire fleet just became a pile of meat in the universe. Chen Ming wasted 10 minutes of his time in vain. The first-generation Zerg Queen, who was hiding somewhere, did not seem to send a fleet to die again, and the galaxy suddenly returned to peace. While the mechanical fleet was collecting the bodies of the Zerg fleet, it looked like they were going to take their bodies to the planet where they were stationed to generate electricity. Chen Ming knew that this should be considered an opportunity. The first-generation Zerg Queen used its fleet to lead away part of the mechanical fleet next to the Colossus, which would obviously make it easier for Chen Ming to move. As long as he was given the opportunity to get close to the Colossus, there would be only one result for the Colossus. The superbody turned into a red and white stream of light in the universe, moving rapidly towards the Colossus. At the moment when Chen Ming was only less than 3 seconds away from the Colossus at the speed of the superbody in normal time, a pure white shadow rose from the surface of the planet occupied by the mechanical race and rushed towards Chen Ming's superbody. From a perspective without time acceleration, it was a blurry image. But Chen Ming, who was on the superbody activated by the time flow core, saw it very clearly. It was another superbody of the mechanical race. The ship structure was different from the superbody he was riding. It was a real superbody, not his prototype superbody. Chen Ming's heart sank. The current situation was still within expectations. Since the first wave of attempts by the mechanical race used a prototype superbody, the complete version of the superbody would definitely come later. But Chen Ming didn't expect it to come so quickly. He immediately changed the trajectory of his superbody, trying to bypass the mechanical race superbody and go straight to the Colossus. In space, if you want to defend against a large target like the Colossus, it is not enough to just use a superbody, especially when the target it wants to intercept has the same level of speed as it. The route changed by Chen Ming opened a winding red and white track near the superbody. The mechanical superbody chasing Chen Ming seemed to be completely unaffected by his action of changing the trajectory. In just a blink of an eye, the mechanical superbody caught up with his superbody and once again intercepted him and the Colossus. And this mechanical superbody was still rushing towards Chen Ming, as if it was going to die with Chen Ming's superbody. Chen Ming couldn't help but frown. Because he found that this superbody seemed a little too scary, it was simply outrageous to the extreme. Although his prototype superbody was a prototype, the time flow core installed inside it had a basic acceleration of only 1,200 times. But under the effect of his psychic power, this acceleration limit can reach more than 6,300 times. Although in order to ensure combat effectiveness, it is necessary to reduce the time flow core effect by about 1/3 to avoid overload damage in battle, resulting in a 10-fold acceleration effect. But even so, there is still more than 4,000 times acceleration. And this official version of the superbody kept up with the speed of his superbody when Chen Ming used psychic overload. This means that the acceleration effect of the official superbody has completely crushed the prototype. And at the moment when this official superbody discovered Chen Ming's superbody, all the mechanical races in the entire galaxy were instantly on full alert. Just now, a whole Zerg fleet faced the first generation of Zerg Queen, and only a few mechanical race warships went to deal with it. But when facing Chen Ming, all the mechanical race warships in the entire galaxy noticed Chen Ming's existence under the warning of the new superbody of the mechanical race. Chen Ming subconsciously looked around the situation in the galaxy and finally locked on the new superbody. Only it is the real enemy. Chen Ming ignored the fleets on the surrounding battlefields. They are not opponents for the superbody, and they can't even cause any effective interference. But the new superbody is completely different. Chen Ming didn't want to fight with him. His goal was always the Colossus. Only the Colossus can be regarded as the most efficient way to destroy the natives on the planet. Even when the superbody does this, it can't be more efficient than the Colossus. So Chen Ming has been trying to bypass the Colossus, trying to bypass the new superbody and hit the Colossus directly. But this new superbody seemed to be able to predict all his operations and constantly blocked his actions. Gradually, Chen Ming also realized that the new superbody not only had a stronger time flow core than his superbody, but also had stronger performance than his superbody. Chen Ming tried to control the new superbody several times, but was dodged by the new superbody and almost gave Chen Ming's superbody a fatal blow. Moreover, these fatal attacks of the new superbody were all carried out with the idea of dying together. Under the premise that the performance of the superbody ship was not as good as the new superbody, and both could be split after being destroyed. Chen Ming could not accept the result of dying together. Although he could accept the loss of a superbody, as long as he could use the superbody to replace the Colossus, it would not be a loss, and at most he could repair it later. But he could not accept dying together with the new superbody, because after the split, the overall combat effectiveness would remain unchanged, and his superbody would only be more difficult to find opportunities. And there was also a mechanical fleet besieging it nearby. Although they could not stop Chen Ming's superbody, they still had a certain ability to stop the left and right facets and 4 submachines after the superbody split. At worst, they could use the hull to restrict the action of the superbody in disguise. And at this time, there was a new mechanical fleet in the galaxy that was jumping over and constantly blocking the area near the Colossus. The mechanical fleet seemed to have prepared at least 20 battleships in total. One battleship in each galaxy was indeed an extremely luxurious ship configuration compared to the Empire. for the fleet under the cover of the new superbody. This number was enough to create an advantage for the new superbody in the overall battle situation. Chen Ming could not find a way to get close to the Colossus. Instead, he was constantly avoided by the new superbody from the inner circle of the galaxy, and the distance from the Colossus was getting farther and farther. Seeing that the chance was getting smaller and smaller, Chen Ming finally couldn't help it. It's okay that the superbody can't beat the new superbody, but can he beat the fleet of the mechanical family?
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.